All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Physical Geology 1403. We're gonna have fun this semester. Geology, I'm gonna ask this right off the bat. How many of you signed up for geology because you thought it would be easier than biology or chemistry? Yeah, that's how it starts for a lot of us. I'm not gonna tell you it's gonna be easier. I'll say it'll be easier in some ways. For example, I give you no math. Woohoo! But, you know, the theoretical stuff, the science stuff, there's going to be a lot of that. We talk about chemistry and physics and biology, all of this. And if you later go on to take 1404 from me, which is the follow-up to this class, we're going to have a lot more fun with that as well. This class is mostly about minerals and rocks and what makes our Earth physically, hence the name physical geology. Whereas historical geology, the next one, talks about the history of life on Earth, how it began, you know, in theory. There are several theories about that. And then also how it ties into the history of geology on our Earth and how we can use geology to study things like the history of life. It's a lot of what 1404 is. I encourage you to take that class, especially if you feel a good connection to this class. And if any of you decide to change your major to geology as a result of this class, I won't complain. Do I have any geology majors here already? No, I usually get one or two a year. All right. Well, I'm going to start off with some introductions from you, and then I'll talk a little bit about me. So let's start on this side. I had everyone put their names, and some of them are like easy to see from the front, and some of them I'll have to walk a little bit further away. I really should stop using the red cards because I've realized that it's hard for my eyes to pick out whatever is written on the red cards for whatever reason. Do I have any red cards left? No, I handed them all out today. Just my luck. Okay, so let's start here with Isaiah. Tell me who you are, where you're from, what your major is, and one cool thing about you. 4 things. And by the way, give me a second. I'm going to do this every now and then. For my students watching this online later on GoReact, what you can do is over on the right side of your screen, there's going to be a time-stamped chat box. So wherever you are in the lecture, the minute you start typing, that comment will be time-stamped to that moment in the lecture. So I can go in and review it and interact with you later, as can your other students that watch this after you. So go ahead and do the same 4 things. Your name, where you're from, what your major is, and one cool thing about you. Go ahead and put that in the chat right now. Hit it.
My name is Isaiah Contreras. I'm from here, and my major is business administration. And I think one cool thing about me is I can play the violin.
You play the violin. Are you really good? Not that good? Okay. Is it something that you're continuing to learn?
Yeah.
But you're a business administration major. So music's going to stay a hobby? All right. Just a fun thing to go? Yeah, everyone needs that. All right, go ahead.
My name is Gabriel. I live here, but I was born in Ventura, California.
Okay.
I'm majoring in mechanical engineering. Here right now, I'm just trying to get my associates in general focus in STEM.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to transfer over to tech.
Uh-huh.
One interesting thing about me is I have a business.
What's your business?
It's 432 Vintage. I sell vintage clothing.
Vintage clothing. Cool. I have a little business on the side too. I 3D print. I do custom 3D prints. That's cool. Good for you. Yeah.
I'm Ashton Mufon, and my major is STEM. And did I forget anything?
Where are you from?
Oh, I'm from here.
You're from here. And one cool thing about you.
I like cornbread.
You like cornbread. That's cool. All right. Jose.
I'm Jose. I'm from here. Actually, is a center studies with center institute.
Okay.
Something interesting is I like playing soccer.
You like what?
Playing soccer.
You like playing soccer. Okay.
My name's Trent. I'm from here. My major is education, and then something cool is my great grandfather restored over 200 classic cars before he passed away 2 years ago.
Wow. That is cool. He did that here?
In Big Spring, and
Big
then
Spring.
some of them were here. He did them all
So he's
over.
probably pretty well known in the vintage car scene in this area. That's pretty cool. Awesome.
My name is Andrew. I'm from here. My major is general studies, but I'm coming back to do auto tech.
Auto tech.
And we just finished rebuilding a 457 big block.
That sounds like a big engine.
It's
I know very little about cars. I got a Jeep last year, and I've just started customizing it myself. So I'm getting into it. Like I spliced some wires, gave myself new headlights and stuff like that. I'm doing one thing at a time, but I'm getting there. That's cool though.
Just put in a 2000 Chevy.
Very cool.
My name is Samuel Adete. I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm currently a STEM major.
Okay.
Something interesting about me is I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Okay.
My name is Jeff Macho. I was born and raised here. My major is paralegal studies, and something cool is I'm a Bucks fan.
You're a Bucks fan. Okay.
Sad game.
Look at this. All right.
My name is Sage. I'm from Odessa. Major in education.
I like tennis too. I like tennis and pickleball. I don't have that much
Oh,
time
yeah,
playing
pickleball.
pickleball. Yeah. Do you play at the courts here ever?
One time I did.
We're working on getting some lights in there so that they can be open after dark. We've been asking for money for that for about a year now. We'll see if it happens. Yeah, I like playing tennis and pickleball and rugby. I play rugby too. You never played rugby? It's very different from tennis and pickleball.
Yeah, I've never-
No? You know what it is though?
No.
Any of you know what rugby is?
Yeah.
Okay. Think football, full tackle. You can only pass sideways or backwards, not forwards, and there's no padding. So you get damaged real easy. Also, your name is Sage with an I in it. S-A-I-G-E. I haven't seen that before. I've seen S-A-G-E like the herb before. That's cool. Unique. Yeah.
My name is Anthony Hicks. I was born in Midland, but was raised in Odessa. The interesting thing, I'm a 49ers fan, but we didn't do good this season. We weren't on our A game.
I've never been terribly invested in any one particular team, but my wife is from Seattle, so she insists that we are Seahawks fans. I've never been invested in any particular team, but it's always interesting to me that depending on where we are in the season, people are more or less willing to say who their team is, right? Like sometimes they're a little more reluctant.
Hi, I'm Daisy Veguera.
Daisy.
I'm majoring in teaching early childhood to 6th grade. I was born in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and something interesting about myself is I moved a lot when I was young, so I know a lot.
Me too. Me too. Where all of you lived?
I lived in California, Oklahoma, North Dakota, South.
Where in North Dakota?
I don't remember the name, but
No.
I remember the state or the city of Oklahoma. It was Weatherford, Oklahoma.
Weatherford, Oklahoma. Okay. I lived in North Dakota for a year working in the Bakken oil field after I got my my bachelor's degree. And then I went to Louisiana to get my master's degree. I'll talk more about that later. But I've lived a lot of those places too. That's cool. Moving around when you're young is a valuable life experience. Yeah. Let's go over here.
My name is Marquez. I'm a STEM major, and I plan to go into computer science when I graduate from here. And then, did I say I was from here?
Yes.
Yes. And I guess an interesting thing about me is that I'd like to dabble in computer languages.
Computer languages. Very cool. My brother-in-law is finishing up his PhD right now on helping computers basically learn how to translate different languages and code and all of that. And I don't know, I don't understand it all. His major is like Arabic, but then all of a sudden he got recruited by some company in California to start working with computer literacy, like teaching computers how to use different languages for different tasks. I don't know, I don't understand all of it, but they hired him because he can speak 8 different languages. And that was fascinating to me. So that's cool though.
I'll get you hired somewhere.
Yeah.
Really quick.
We thought he was going to get tapped by the CIA. He met with someone at one point, and then we were like, "Oh, it's going to happen!" But then this company, I guarantee this company offered way more money than the CIA ever could.
My name is Giselle. I live here. My major is STEM,
Mm-hmm.
and I plan to go into mechanical engineering.
Mechanical engineering.
One interesting thing about me is I like art.
You like art? Okay, what kind of art? Sculpting, watercolor?
Just any kind.
Any kind,
I
all
like
art.
just to mess with art. Well, actually, no, I don't like painting that much.
Okay.
Like just
But like, Like physical art or like acting, singing, things like that too?
Physical.
Physical art. Okay. Cool. Very nice. Thank you, Giselle.
My name is Miriam.
No. You put 2 exclamation points. It's Miriam!
2 exclamation points. I'm a STEM major. I'm planning to go into aerospace engineering. I was born here, and one interesting fact about me is that I like
You like to cook? What do you like to cook?
just about anything.
Anything.
Though I'm not good at it.
That comes with time. I love to cook. I was not always good at it, but I love cooking now.
Hi, I'm Abigail. My major is STEM. I'm planning on going to chemical engineering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from here, if I didn't mention that. And the cool thing about me is that I crochet.
You crochet. Are you good at it? Like you
Yeah.
can knock something out of it's like
I
real
finished
easy?
making a bag.
Nice. Very cool. Crochet.
My name is Raymond, and I'm from Washington.
Where in Washington?
I want to say near the Seattle area.
You want to say, so it was a long time ago that you moved from there?
Yeah, and I moved to a little town called Andrews, like around 45 minutes from here.
Oh yeah, I go to Andrews.
And I like to travel, and I'm an art major.
Nice. I lived all around the Seattle area for 2 years. And my wife, like I said, is from there. So if you ever remember what city you're from, let me know. I might have been there or she might have been there. Marissa?
In general studies. And an interesting fact about me is
You like to play volleyball? Volleyball is really fun. I'm not good at it, but I like to play volleyball. And my brother, I must admit, I did not give you a card. Go ahead and write your name on it, big bold letters. Fold it so I can see it from the front. Thank you. Let's go here. Uh-huh.
I'm from Chihuahua, Mexico,
Chihuahua.
and I like cows.
You like what?
Cows.
Cows. You like cows. Is your house full of cow stuff? Yeah. That's how my grandmother was, actually. She was obsessed with cows. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I am from Andrews, Texas.
Uh-huh.
My major is education, and an interesting thing about me is I like to read.
What do you like to read? What genres?
I read anything.
Anything.
I try to read 2 to 3 books a week.
Oh, man, I wish I could do that. I used to read all that. Now I just listen to Audible books. Whenever I'm like grading or something, I'll usually be in there. And if you walk in, I may not even notice you at first because I'll have my headphones in and I'll just be like in the zone listening to my book while I'm grading or writing emails or something like that. I love fantasy and science fiction. Those are my favorites. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You like fantasy? Like epic fantasy? Okay. Like long series sort of stuff? Okay. Have you read The Wheel of Time?
No.
Oh. Have you heard of Brandon Sanderson?
I've heard.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay. You got to read that stuff. Oh, it's so good.
So my name is Claudia Loomis, and my major is STEM. I'm from here, and my fun fact is I played soccer for 13 years.
You played soccer for 13 years. Do you still play soccer?
I got hurt, but I'm gonna go back.
Okay. How'd you get hurt?
I tore my ACL.
Oh, that sucks. I'm sorry. Tearing your ACL. That's not fun. That's cool. So you're like a professional soccer player, though.
Oh yeah.
Is that what you want to do?
I'll see where I get.
See where you. Okay. Very cool.
My name is Abby. My major is business. And what's my name? Oh,
Where are you from? You're from here?
And then something interesting is I'm a Chivas fan.
You're a what?
Chivas fan?
Chivas fan? What are Chivas?
It's a soccer team.
It's a soccer team. Cool. Do I have 2 Abigails? I do have 2 Abigails in the class. All right. So you're Abigail Lake, and what's your last name? What is it? Hohim? Okay. Abiel. Is that okay with you? Just Abby? Okay. Abby and Abigail. Do you go by Abby too? You go by Abigail? Okay. I'll try to remember to do that. All right. Now, I am going to ask you to do something very difficult for me right off the bat. Are you ready? I'm going to ask you all to speak nice and loud. Not because I'm hard of hearing, although some of you have very quiet voices, I can tell already. Speak nice and loud. not just for me, but because I try and make this as immersive an experience for my online class as possible. The questions you ask, I guarantee someone in my online classes has as well. If they can hear your questions, and there's a microphone right there next to that lunar globe right there, right in front of it. Yeah. So it'll catch you guys great. Okay. But those of you off on the side, if you would ask your questions or make your comments or whatever input you have, make it nice and loud so it can get caught either on that or on my microphone, wherever I am around the room. You may have noticed that I have moved my chair off to the side. Matter of fact, I'm going to move it even further. I'm a walker and a talker. I don't like sitting, really. The only time you'll ever really see me sitting is when I'm talking to you during lab time, or we're doing like an exam review, and then it's kind of symbolic. I'll just like sit down, like, this is a chill day. We're just talking about the exam, right? Otherwise, when I'm into it, when I'm talking, Jose knows, he's seen me teach, right? I'm walking and I'm talking and I'm all over the place, okay? All right. This is me. This is kind of an outdated picture of me. This is a picture from a year ago that we took, but my name is Josh Hart. I have an associate's degree in science from Ohio, from a junior college in Ohio. I have a bachelor's degree in geology from Brigham Young University in Rexburg, Idaho. And I have a master's degree in geology from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. And yesterday, I started my second year of my PhD through the University of North Dakota. So I've got 1 year under my belt and 3 more to go. I graduate December 2028. So makes you feel any better? I'm in the same boat you all are. Somewhat miserable. But it's good. It's good. We do this for our futures, right? Just got to keep that in mind. All right. I have a whole lot of different work experience under my belt. I've worked in the oil field, like I mentioned earlier, in North Dakota and in a few other places. I've worked, my master's degree is actually in paleontology. As a matter of fact, a lot of my field experience is also in paleontology. Do y'all know what paleontology is? Study of bones? Fossils, exactly. It's the study of the history of life on Earth, basically, which bones are a huge component of. Fossils are any relic of life that we can get data from, right? And so bones, very important there. I spent a lot of time with microfossils. I've spent a lot of time with dinosaur bones. I have some bones here, some I found, some I've acquired since just by purchasing them. I'll bring some of that experience up every now and then. If you ever have any questions about that, feel free to ask. I've worked in several museums. I've worked at a gold mine as well. I worked at a gold mine as an exploration geologist in Nevada for a while. Prior to coming here, I came here in August 2020. Before that, I was working on the Keystone Pipeline in Montana. How many of you remember what the Keystone Pipeline is? Yeah? What is it?
Like a big pipeline that stretches across the Montana into like this pond. It's like a big stretch of mountain.
Well, yeah, and it goes even further than that. You're right. It's a very wide gauge oil pipeline. And the whole idea was, instead of having dozens and dozens of smaller pipelines that go all the way across the southern Canada and northern United States, why don't we just make one massive pipeline that everything can get pushed into, and then we just have to have that one impact zone. So instead of having dozens that stretch across the United States, just make the one. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But it was going all the way from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico was the goal. And ending up at the refineries down there where you can make your gasoline and then ship it around wherever it needs to go. So I was working there as a paleontological observer. Basically, I was, aside from the supervisor, I was the only other guy on the site that had the authority to say stop working, just on a whim. Everyone has the authority to say that if there's a safety issue, but I could say it and the supervisor could say it if we just wanted to. The reason why is because it is against federal law to break or destroy any paleontological resources, any dinosaur bones. And there are lots of dinosaur bones in Montana. So I was put up there so I could observe as they were constructing this pipeline and digging through this rock layer, because if they dug up any bones and then they accidentally destroyed them, that would be reason to shut down the project because they broke the law. So I was there to prevent that from happening. It was a really fun job and I loved it. But remember, this is August 2020. there was a rather important election going on at the time. And towards the end of the month, I was like, I can see where this is going, right? I can see where this is going. So I started looking for another job. I got hired here, moved my family down here in November, right before President Biden took office. First day he was in office, he shut down the pipeline and 11,000 people lost their jobs. I was not one of them because I paid attention, right? Also, I wanted to spend more time with my family, right? I had a little baby boy at the time. He was like 2 years old. He's 6 years old now. I have 3 kids, as you can see here, 6, 4, and 2. This picture is taken last year, so it's about a year out of date, but that's how old they are now. You will probably meet them at some point. Sometimes my wife just brings them to say hi at random points during the day. But also, one of the Fridays that we are going to be having this semester, we're going to have a, I call them silly geology movie nights. Okay, so one of these Fridays, probably towards the end of the semester, week 6 or week 7, once you have some of this knowledge under your belt, we're going to take a vote on a movie that was made using silly science, and we're going to rip it apart. Okay, so we're just going to gather probably in that room over here, because something that you'll notice, it's behaving so far, but this projector is kind of spotty. It'll go in and out at various times. So when we watch the movie, it'll be in the next room over. That is also my classroom. But yeah, we'll just pick a movie and then we'll watch it together, bring snacks, bring drinks, bring family, friends, whatever. It's fun. We had like 25 people last semester. It was a blast. And then like there's extra credit for it. So I'll give you all an extra credit assignment. And then there's like 3 or 4 questions that are like, tell me in what way the movie was ridiculous, the science was ridiculous because of what we learned in the class, right? So we'll have a conversation about that and you can get some extra credit for it. It's fun and it's extra credit. What's better than that, right? Nothing. Okay, so yeah, but my point is my kids usually come to that, at least the oldest one, sometimes the youngest, the second one as well. Okay, let's see. Do you have any questions about me personally before I move on? Yeah.
I was working in a museum.
Fantastic. I love museum work. My dream end goal job would be museum curator. Just keeping track of all the collections, accepting new collections, the excitement that you get by going out in the field, because normally what you'll do when you work at a museum is you'll spend the summers out in the field, and then the fall and winter and spring is when you're working on whatever you collected. So most of my summer, I wouldn't even bother thinking about what I found. Like, oh, that's awesome. I think that's a Tyrannosaur bone. I'm not sure, but I'm going to plaster it up. I'm going to take it back to the lab this weekend. And then the next week, I'm like, I don't even open that cast. I'm going to go back out in the field and I'm going to find more stuff. Maybe I'll go back to that same place and see if I can find more bones. But the entire summer, I'm just finding stuff. And then once the bad weather starts setting in, usually around the beginning of August, is when you just kind of like, all right, field work is done. And then you walk into your collections room and you see all the dozens of things that you found. And you're like, time to dig in, right? And you spend the next 8 months basically ripping all of those casts apart and figuring out what it is, getting real excited about it, putting it back together. There was one bone I found about this long. Ended up being a brand new species of Brachiosaur. But we didn't know that until we finished putting it together. But it took me 3 months to reconstruct because it was just falling apart. It's like a gigantic 3D puzzle that you have to figure out how to put back together. But then once you do and you realize this is a new species, and it's a species that died 2 million years after when we thought that brachiosaurs were already dead, that's when it pays off and it's really big. It's really fun. But yeah, museum work is really cool. Anything else? Yeah.
Okay, so how long did you have to learn to be able to identify those big details?
Okay, that's a great question. How long do you have to learn to be able to identify those big details? I know people who are better at it than me and never went to college. A lot of it has less to do with, I mean, going to college helps. It helps you get there sooner. I'll say that. Those people have been doing it for 30 years, right? I'll give you a comparison. Most of the oil field guys, most of the oil field geologists or engineers that are in their 60s in this area never went to college or never got more than their first degree, like a bachelor's degree. These days, you have to get at least a master's degree, and for some positions, at least a PhD before an oil company will look at you, right? In the olden times, It mattered less how much education you have and more how much experience you had. And so a lot of the older guys, yeah, I'll be able to put a bone in front of them. They'll say, oh, it's a blah, 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 blah. And I would have had to think about it and compare it to some notes and then think, okay, well, I learned about this, right? At least at first. But as time goes on, you get used to it. And that's when something called pattern recognition comes in. I say whenever I teach paleontology courses, I tell people the number one rule in paleontology for fossil identification isn't how many things do you have memorized, it's pattern recognition. And it's the same thing when you're looking through rock to try and find fossils. I'll go on a field trip with some students, right? And I'll say, look, there's a fossil there, and there's a fossil there, and there's a fossil there. And like, how are you seeing these? It's just pattern recognition. Being able to recognize this shape does not look like what else is around it. One of these things is not like the other, right? But that only happens after you see it a certain number of times. And the more times you see it, the better at it you are. We have a saying in geology, the best geologist is the one who has seen the most rocks or touched the most rocks, right? That's not always necessarily true, but it gets the point across, right? Experience is big. The more of it that you get exposed to, the better you are, which is why we always encourage you all to get as many internships as possible, right? During your college experience, because then you can leave with your degree and enough experience under your belt that employers like you. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Did that answer your question? Good. What else? I hope it's obvious that I really like what I do and I really like my subject. I'm sorry if my energy is just like, for you this early in the morning. I hope you get used to it. I hope I can keep this energy up. The beginning of the semester is always better than the end of the semester, right? But I do. I really love I really love geological sciences. Not just because I find Earth interesting. And that sounds like a weird thing to say, but as we go through the course, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about here when I say, by understanding the science of Earth, you're understanding the science of the universe. The same science, the same laws, the same principles that we observe here are true everywhere else, with minor, detailed minor modifications. For example, geology on Venus works the same way that it does on Earth. It just has a vastly different atmosphere and a vastly different temperature, and therefore, yeah, a lot of the surface is in a state of melting and cooling, but the geological principles are the same, even though the physical states may not be. Okay? So the things that you learn here are going to help you understand not only Earth, but the universe, and I think that's so important for us to understand our place here. Cool? All right, I'm excited. Let's talk a little bit more about the course. This is my email address, jhart. Remember that D, it's a silent D. Hart, one of those funny German names with a silent D in it, right? jhart@odessa.edu. Please, 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 please do not use the Blackboard messaging service. I sent this in an announcement yesterday. Do not try sending me messages on Blackboard. Why? Because it's great and convenient, but I can't answer it unless I'm on Blackboard. So I'll get an email notification saying, hey, this student sent you an email. And I'll say, great. Wish I knew what it said or that I could answer it from my phone, right? Chances are I'm not in my office when you send that. Chances are I'm somewhere else. And I wish I could answer you, but I'm on my phone and I can't do that. So send me an email if you have a question or a concern. And by the way, please express your questions and concerns. I can't help you if I don't know there's a problem, right? My first indicator that there's a big problem is usually after my first big round of grading. And I'm like, ooh, okay, end of week 2, this person's struggling. That's 25% of the semester already gone, right? I have only so much time to help you with those things. And by the way, we have to go boom, 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 boom in an 8-week semester. So I can't even say, all right, let's spend a whole day talking about lab 1 when we're already on lab 3, right? Because we have to keep moving. So please come to me with your help, with your questions and that you need help before it's to that point. That would be the most helpful thing. Cool? So I'll make a deal with you. You ask me questions and ask me for help, and I'll answer your questions and I'll give you help. Deal? Cool. Okay, where was I on here? Class time. It says variable, but that's just because I use the same slide for every class section. So our section is going to be meeting Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30 and ending at 12:20. Why is it so long? Because lab is included. So our typical meeting time on Tuesdays and Thursdays is going to be 1.5 to 2 hours of lecture and then an hour to an hour and a half of lab time. Okay, the rest of the time will just be for lab. And that's not me formally lecturing about things. I can answer questions and help you individually or as groups, but that's time for you all to get familiar with the lab materials and be working on it yourselves or in groups. I strongly encourage group work here. If you know any of the classmates around you, it's fine if you group up with them. What would be really cool is if you learned how to work with people that you aren't familiar with already, especially if it's someone who's in a different category of degree than you are. Get a STEM major, an education major, and an auto mechanic in the same group. You get 3 different ways of thinking, and that could work out a lot better for you than if you have 3 people who think in the same way. Okay? That's how groups work ideally. The syllabus is on Blackboard. I don't have a copy of it here because it changes every semester, right? This is out of date. I need to erase that. I always forget to do this. I have not required a textbook for this class for a year. Instead, there is an online textbook that you all can find on the website that I made. How many of you have looked at that website? A couple of you? Okay. I made a website for this class, and it has a textbook on there, as well as additional materials. You can find things like frequently asked questions for some of them, links to my YouTube channel for additional resources. Your lab materials are on that website, all of it. I made it kind of as intending to be a one-stop shop for the class. So I took out the textbook and I added the website to try and make life a little easier, especially for my online students who have trouble sometimes navigating Blackboard and the things that I say on lecture and all of that. Hopefully all of your questions, everything that you need is on that website. If you have any questions or concerns about it, please let me know. This is what our schedule is going to look like. Now, there are no dates on here. This is generic, but this is about what it's going to look like. We meet twice a week, which means that today, week 1, that's the first time we meet in week 1. On Thursday, it will be the second time we meet in week 1. And then 2 in week 2, and 2 in week 3, and 2 in week 4, and so on and so forth. So this gives you a general idea of the layout. If you want it specifically with the dates for this semester, please look on the syllabus. But we're going to have our first exam in week 4. Second exam, week 6. Well, it's probably going to be either the end of week 6 or the beginning of week 7. It varies by semester depending on if there are any holidays, right? And then our final exam, obviously, at the end of week 8. There's also a lab exam in there. We'll talk more about these exams as time goes on. Our lab schedule looks like this. There are 5 labs. Your lab exam will only cover the first 4. The 5th lab is not going to be on the exam because it's a completely different type of lab, but you still need to complete it, obviously. Okay, let's talk about how I break down the grades in my class. Who struggles with exams? I have my hand up. You can be comfortable raising your hand too. Okay? I have a hard time with exams, especially if they're timed. Timed exams suck because you can't think about the content. All you're thinking about is that timer ticking down. I have a really hard time with those. So since I understand that, I have made my class such that it facilitates people who are good at exams and people who are not good at exams. So 50% of the grades in my class are tied up in the exams and 50% are in the non-exam assignments. Labs, discussion boards. For those of you that are taking the class online, you don't get discussion boards. You interact with each lecture on GoReact, okay? So the way that you do that is for every single one of these lectures, those you online students, you need to answer at least 3 of the questions I ask in class, ask at least 1 question of your own, and comment on at least 2 questions posted by other students. And if that means you need to go back in and participate after a few more students have participated themselves, then please do that. If you can get all 6 of those things done, you get full credit for participating in that lecture. For those of you here in person, you do get discussion boards. We are going to talk and discuss here in class, But outside of class time, you do have 6 discussion boards to take part in as well. Okay? So 50% in exams, 50% not in exams, and about 6% worth of extra credit that you can get. Now, if you can squeeze by just passable exam grades and really nail everything else, you'll pass my class. If you can nail those exams, but labs and discussion boards aren't your thing, you can still pass my class. Okay? The only way anyone should fail my class is if you don't put effort in on both of those different categories. And at that point, you're going to fail. And I'm going to be honest, you deserve to fail because you haven't put in the effort in the class. And that's not why you're in college. Okay? Sound doable? Great. So where does that extra credit come from? I'm very big on notes. Notes are very important. I'm a big believer in what I call the 3-part learning method. You hear something, you write something, and you share something. If I say something to you, if I were to tell you right now, chickens are blue, y'all would be like, oh, not crazy, Professor Hart. He said chickens are blue. You would not remember I said that by the end of the day, probably most of you. However, if any of you wrote that in your notes right now, chickens are blue, you would remember that I said that. Some of you are writing it. You would remember that I said that every time that you looked at your notes. And then if you went home and you looked at your notes, you're like, oh, he said that. And then you turned to your mom or your spouse or whoever and you said, hey, my professor said chickens are blue today. They'd be like, huh, that's a weird thing. And now all of a sudden, it's ingrained a lot deeper than just in one ear, right? So you hear something, you write something, you share something, that puts it in long term for you, all right? So I can't really control how much of this that you share. I hope that you get as excited about it as I am to the point that you want to share this information with other people. That would be awesome. But what I can help is the things that I say and therefore you hear, and the things that you write and therefore notes. So to help encourage you to take notes, they are worth extra credit. There are submission folders for every lecture. There are 13 lectures. For every lecture, you can submit your notes for that lecture. At the end of the semester, I will put 50 extra credit points on your lowest exam if you have turned in all your notes. And they obey my rules. I really only have 2 rules when it comes to notes. I have to be able to read them. If they're not legible, I can't read them and I can't tell how you're doing, right? And they cannot literally be my PowerPoints. You cannot download a copy of my PowerPoints, write some of your notes on them, and then submit that. It has to be all your own work. I don't care if you write down every single word I say. I actually had a student do that one time. She would watch my lecture recordings over and over and over and write every word I said. She ended up with the notes in a binder that thick by the end of the 8 weeks. It was crazy. First of all, that told me I talk too much. Second of all, that was really impressive because that was a lot of time. But however, whatever your note-taking strategy is, I'm not going to nitpick it. Just obey those 2 rules. I got to be able to read it if I open it, and it cannot be my own PowerPoints. It can't be my work. It has to be your work, even if it's my words. Fair? And then you get 50 extra credit points. Let me give you some context here. Your first exam is worth 200 points. Your second exam is worth 100. Your lab exam is worth 100. And your final exam is worth 200. Does 50 sound like a lot of points to make up for your worst exam score? If your worst exam score is like a 70, all of a sudden, I put 50 points. Let's say you get a 70 on your exam 2. I put 50 extra credit points on that. All of a sudden, that's 120% on that exam. Motivation for good notes. Okay? Here's the other thing. You can use your notes during exams. It's open note. So the better your notes are, the better you'll do on exams. And if you submit all of those, and if they're good, I will even throw more points on top of those exams. There's no reason not to take strong notes in my class. Cool? The rest of that extra credit, that other 1% or so, that's in the movie night and the first day assignments that y'all should complete today or tomorrow. I believe I have them due tomorrow. They're on Blackboard. There's 4 of them, I believe. Just stuff that I require you to acknowledge or that the college requires you to take. Okay? And there's a little bit of extra credit tied up in that as well. Any questions about how I grade in this class? Yes? Can I what?
Can you retake the lab?
Ah, I'm so glad you asked that question. Miriam. Did I say that right? Yes. Okay, Miriam. Yes, you can retake the labs. How many times? As many times as you want. This is my philosophy. Any non-exam assignment is not an evaluation. It is a learning experience. So why would I limit the number of times you can take a lab when every time you take it is a learning experience? That doesn't seem very effective for me to do as an educator. So yes, you can attempt the labs as many times as you feel like you have time for. So if you take lab 1 and you get a 40%, feel free to take it again. You take it again and you get 60%, feel free to take it again. You take it again, you get 80%. I really want to push for that A. Take it again. I will happily grade it as many times as you submit it. I will happily tutor you on that as many times as you want it, because my goal is for you to understand it. Cool? And if you're doing this all in groups, it would be even easier for you and for me, because I can tutor all of you at the same time, because you're at the same place. You're in at the same progress on the labs. Karina, did you have a question? I thought you had your hand up out of the corner of my eye. No? Oh, but you do. Yeah.
How do you feel about digital notes?
Digital notes are totally fine. I have absolutely no problem with digital notes. Most of them end up being digital. It's the handwritten ones that I really need to worry about being legible, right? Because not everyone has the same quality of handwriting. If you make them digitally, totally fine. I will say, though, Odessa College software and technology works through Windows software. So if you are on a MacBook, any of you, I know that some of you are because you're with the ECISD. How many of you are high school students? I usually have a bunch. Okay. If you are using an ECISD MacBook, you will need to convert it to a PDF format before you submit anything, because I cannot open the .pages format that MacBooks default to. Okay, on my Windows computers here at OC, I can't open those. Okay, so you'll need to convert it to a PDF before you do that. Anything else? Okay. I'm going to warn you today, we're not going to have any lab time, because all this intro stuff plus the first lecture takes up the entire 3-hour block. So if at any point you need to stand up and just, that's totally fine. I understand it. Okay. Your objectives here. By the end of this class, I want each of you to be well versed in the science of geology to the point where someone could ask you a question. I wonder about this natural earth process. And you can say, I have the answer, right? Something like that. How cool would it be if you go to a friend's house for dinner and you look and you see, oh, that's a cool rock in their fireplace. And you're like, yeah, I don't know what it is, though. And you're like, I do. Right? And then you can just tell them, what a great icebreaker. Cool. You're on a date with someone like, hey, you want to know what that rock is? They'll probably say no, but it's cool that you can say it. Right? So that's my objective here. I want you to be well enough versed that you can carry on a conversation with someone who knows absolutely nothing about geology, but also understands something that an expert in geology would say at the same time. That's the point. I don't expect you all to become experts. I just expect you to become versed in the science. Okay? And also I want to help you develop things like your critical thinking skills. That's huge. We don't teach philosophy at OC. In my opinion, that's a crime. They got rid of the philosophy program. They really should. There's not really anywhere for you to get any directly critical thinking encouraging courses. And so science, it falls to the sciences to encourage that as a main component. And so you're going to notice that I reference the scientific method here a lot. And the ways that we do our labs are based on the scientific method. And we'll talk more about what the scientific method is later today. But I'm going to encourage you to think critically as well. Okay? Don't just take anything that everyone says for granted. Far too much of our society is based upon what people see on social media. Okay? You see something on TikTok? Well, until Sunday, right? How many of you are sad about that? How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, the TikTok ban goes into effect this weekend in the United States. Okay, but you see something on TikTok and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. But then you have absolutely no thought in your head that you should verify it by looking at another source, right? That happens all the time. Yeah. You may. Thank you for asking. So critical thinking is not just taking that for granted. It's, I'm going to investigate this. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to look into it myself, right? That's a huge part of critical thinking. That's a big part of science, like we'll talk about here in a little bit. All right, I have some standards for my class. Obviously, I will not accept cheating. What does that entail? Looking up answers online. I am aware of the websites that have my course materials on them that past students have posted. I monitor them. I know exactly what answers have been provided there. Okay. Also, there are many assignments that I will happily allow you to use AI on, right? AI won't be very helpful to help you identify a mineral. I'll just tell you that right now before you try it. ChatGPT can't identify any minerals, okay? Like written answers, like answers to questions, it may be able to help give you data on. I would not encourage that you use the sources it provides because AI has not yet reached to the point where it will give you reliable sources. It literally makes up sources for you. If you've ever tried this, I test it every now and then. Last time I tested it was about 2 weeks ago. I said, give me a list of sources to support this data. And half of them were made up, totally fictional, okay? So that's a dead giveaway, for one thing, okay? But absolutely do not ever use AI on your exams. I have ways of figuring out if you have. I also know if you have worked together on your exams. Group work is not acceptable on exams. This is cheating in my book. Okay, I let you use notes. And by the way, I didn't mention this before. Because I hate timed exams, and yet I am required to time your exams, I have maxed out the timer on all your exams. So each one of your exams has a 500-minute timer on it. Yeah, that's a lot of time. You guys know how much time that is? It's like 8.5 hours. To take an exam. You think that do you think that 40 questions in 8.5 hours is good? You think that's fair?
No, I think we need a lot more.
You need a lot more? I wish I could give you a lot more. Literally, if you let me do 100 hours, I would do it. Because I hate time exams. And yet I'm required to have a timer on it. I just make it the maximum amount of timer. So don't work in groups. Stay within that time limit. Otherwise, it will auto-submit. And use your notes. Don't use AI. Very easy, simple things to not do. Okay? Don't do that. Plagiarism, big thing. What is plagiarism? Don't copy each other's work. Don't copy the work of someone online without giving them credit. Don't use the work of someone online in the exams at all, right? Stuff like that. If you have a doubt as to what is plagiarism, it probably is plagiarism, just ask me. I will happily point you in the right direction. Say, yes, feel free to use that source. Just say last name, comma, year that source was written. Something that I can verify, right? I am going to insist that in my classroom and also in the online chat for my online course that we use clean language. Why? Well, you are in college, and by coming to college, you have undertaken a road to better yourself and to learn how to express yourself in intelligent ways. And foul language, in my personal opinion, is the most unintelligent way to express yourself. You are learning how to express yourself better, differently, more maturely. So let's exercise that in my class by not using any foul language. Fair? Thank you. And then also, please put your phones away during class unless it is absolutely required. It is inconsiderate to both myself and your classmates, especially if you're in a study group with other people here, for you to not pay attention. If you need to leave the room to take a phone call, just let me know, and I'll say, absolutely, go, whatever, your business, not my business. Just come back, and if you're not going to come back, you have to let me know, especially those of you that are in high school. I am accountable for you for 3 hours, and if you're not here, if I can't account for your whereabouts, I get in trouble. It's happened before. I'll say, oh yeah, whatever you got to do, take care of it. They say, hey, my mom is downstairs. She's going to pick me up and take me to the doctor. Okay, sure, that's your business. I get in trouble for that if the school does not officially release you. And if they do want to officially release you, They need to tell me directly. They can't call you and say, tell your teacher this. You need to hand me your phone, and I need to hear it from the representative of your school. Or they need to call me on that phone and tell me themselves. Okay? That just keeps everyone from getting in trouble. That's my rules on phones. Cool? When you email me, I promise I can respond within 24 hours. The exception is if you send me one of those messages on Blackboard and I happen to not be accessible to a computer for 24 hours because I can't respond on my phone to those. Okay? Within 24 hours during weekdays, I will always answer you. Weekends and holidays, understandably, I hope, my priority is with my family. So it may be more than 24 hours if you send me a message during those times. It's usually not, because I'll usually put my kids to bed on like Saturday evening, and I'll have an email from one of y'all, and I'll just answer it because my kids are asleep and I haven't started my own homework yet or something like that. But just understand if it does take a little bit longer than 24 hours on those times. Cool? That's my business. It only took me 50 minutes to get through all that. Any questions about anything we've covered so far? Okay, let me do a quick mental checklist here and see if there's anything I missed. I don't think there is. At some point, though, for the rest of the day, I'm probably going to remember something that I forgot, and then I'll just cut that in there. Okay, shall we begin on the content? Actual geology work. You kind of shake your head there. You're not ready for this? Alyssa, you'll be fine. Okay, here we go. Geology is often the butt of scientific jokes. Why? Because it's about rocks. Who cares about rocks, right? How many of you have read a comic strip or watched a show and then make fun of geology? How many of you have watched The Big Bang Theory? That is such a good show. I love that show. If you have not watched it, watch it. Hilarious. But one of the main characters is constantly making fun of geology and geologists. And I laugh as I cry, right? A little bit. It's hilarious. But a lot of people think of geology as kind of just like, oh, they just study rocks. No one likes that. It's not interesting. But there are so many parts of geology that branch out into other sciences. And like I mentioned earlier, by studying geology, we're studying the universe. I'll talk more about that here in a minute. What is geology, though? Geo means earth. Logos means a discourse, a discussion, basically. So geology is effectively a conversation about earth and how we can understand it. I call this Greek word math, by the way. Okay? When you take two words and shove them together to make a new word, I call that Greek word math. They do that a lot. So what is part of geology? There are so many different branches of geology. Paleoclimatology. That's actually what my master's thesis was on. I analyzed microfossils, the isotopes within microfossils. We'll talk more about isotopes in a bit. And I studied those isotopes to determine precipitation rates and temperature variation during the Pleistocene, the last ice age that we had. Okay, for Oregon, this was a study that was done in Eastern Oregon that I did. Okay, so I made a paleoclimate reconstruction of Eastern Oregon by studying fossils. So that's paleoclimatology. Geochemistry, that should be fairly easy to understand, right? The chemistry of rocks. Planetary geology. Oh, what is planetary geology? Right, geology is the study of Earth. Planetary geology is the study of planets in general. It goes out into space. That's one example of how the things that you learn here will help us understand other places. I actually am quite involved in the study of planetary geology. I have several friends that work for NASA subsidiaries that I do work with regularly. We discuss various projects. Right now we're working on a few projects related to getting people back on the moon and perhaps starting some mining operations there. The next couple of years are going to be very interesting for the moon, may I say. Actually, my PhD dissertation subject is lunar policy. My actual PhD is in Earth System Science and Policy. And my dissertation is going to be developing, or I can't say developing because I'm not a politician yet, but Actually, I hope I'm never really a politician, but you get what I'm saying. I want to be involved in the policy creation process. Getting new rules in place for how people behave on the moon. Because right now there's nothing. There's absolutely no rule. The last time anyone attempted to make a rule about behavior when people go to the moon was 1969. And here we are, probably only about 2 years away from Russians, Chinese, and Americans walking on the moon at the same time. And there are no rules in place for how people behave up there. Someone just whips out a gun and shoots someone else. It's not murder. They're on the moon. They're not on Earth. We need to have these laws in place before people go up there. So that's what my dissertation is going to be on, helping to develop that sort of policy. Okay. Okay. There are two different categories of geology that you are going to learn about here. There's the physical geology, the materials that make up our Earth and the ways that they interact with each other through processes, right? That's what you're going to learn in this class. And then historical geology, like I mentioned earlier today, is going to cover how that all intersects with life and how life has influenced the processes on Earth through time. I'll be offering that during spring 2 if any of you are signed up for that. Earth is dynamic. Before I go to the next slide and give you the answer, let me just ask, how many of you know what the word dynamic means?
Changing.
Changing in what way?
Adaptively?
It's always changing,
Oh.
constantly changing. Dynamic means something that is a constant state of change. Would you say that Earth is in a constant state of change? Yeah, give me some examples of the way that Earth is always changing.
Temperatures.
Temperature, sure.
Erosion.
Erosion, good one.
The tectonic plate.
Tectonic plate movement, I love it.
Earthquakes.
Earthquakes, yes. Yeah, all these natural disasters, right? All these things, landslides, volcanic eruptions, weather, all these things are examples of the way that Earth is constantly changing. These are kind of big examples, though, right? Earth is changing in so many other ways, so many smaller ways, too, right? For example, things like erosion. Your name tag fell down. Sorry, what's your name? Daisy. That's right, Daisy. Okay. Erosion, lithification, the process by which loose sediment, like sand, becomes rock. We call that lithification. We'll cover that in week 3, okay? All of these are examples of how dynamic Earth is, how it's constantly changing in every way around us. Dynamic things are happening in this room right now. People are moving, people are shifting. The air is moving, even though we may not be able to see it. The light photons striking this. I am aging. You are aging. Okay? Lots of things are happening in this room right now. Now, all of these can be kind of grouped into categories of global scale events, things that affect a macro scale for like earthquakes. Okay? Usually felt all over the place. Okay? The largest earthquakes, say in places like Chile or Alaska or Japan, are often felt even at the smallest amount all the way around the world. Okay? And then there's your micro scale things, the small processes, like fossilization. Do you know what fossilization is? How is it possible for something that is biological to become something geological? A fossil is when every cell in a biological organism is replaced by a mineral. A tiny little mineral crystal or grain of something replaces that structure, preserving the shape. It may not preserve the chemistry very well. In some cases it does, which is really cool when that happens. But most of the time, it just preserves the shape. And so we can get these fossils as a result of this process. Very, very, very fine microscopic scale events. I like to say that geology is like the marriage of chemistry and physics, where biology is that favorite brother-in-law that comes to sleep on the couch all the time, right? Biology is not necessary for geology to move forward. Look at Mars. We have absolutely no confirmation that there was ever life on Mars. But there's definitely geology. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of geology that we understand because of things that we have studied here on Earth. It's simply that we have no confirmation that biology ever influenced it. Hopefully, the Perseverance rover project will change that. The Perseverance rover landed on Mars in 2021. Ever since then, it's been collecting samples, geologic core samples. It's been making its way around a giant river delta. There was once flowing water on Mars. If there was ever life on Mars, it would be around where that water was. And so it's collecting 36, I believe, core samples. And those core samples are going to come back to Earth sometime in 2035, 2036. They're about to launch the recovery mission, I believe, either later this year or next year. So it can land there, pick up the samples, and then come back. But then we will have actual or Mars rocks on Earth to analyze for things like fossils. It'll be really cool. Questions? I'm going to remind y'all to ask lots of questions. I guarantee someone else has. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I guarantee someone else has that question, however stupid you think it is. Science without questions is science done wrong. Remember that, okay? So let's talk about some of the people to whom we owe our modern understanding of science. And then we'll talk more about geology in general as time goes on. Aristotle. Guys like Aristotle, we don't call scientists. We refer to them as natural philosophers. A natural philosopher is someone who would attempt to understand the world as they saw it using principles or theories or ideas that were already there in their system, in their culture, in their society. So for example, Aristotle would look at a volcano and he would tell people, it's a pathway to Hades. It's a tunnel that leads straight to Hades. Why would he call it that? By the way, Hades is their underworld, right? The underworld of the Greek pantheon. Why would he say that? Why would it be their version of hell? Why would it lead there?
It's fiery.
Yeah, there's fire and smoke coming out of it. It's obviously a pathway to hell, right? That's what made sense to them. And so that's what he would explain. One time someone brought him fossil fish, skeletons of fish there in a rock, and said, "What is this?" And he said, "Well, it's obviously a fish, but it's in a rock. What's the only possible explanation that there could be for that?"
It was petrified.
Not even that. No, there must be kinds of fish that live in rock, and you found a dead one. That's the only possible explanation without understandings like that of things that you and I take for granted right now, because there is this fundamental foundation of science that we get. Y'all made it through grad school or are still going through high school, right? You have a fundamental basic foundation of science. Even the dumbest person today understands a little bit more about science than they knew, back 300 BC. About some things, anyway. There were some pretty great mathematicians during that time and fantastic philosophers. But things like geology, understanding fossils, they didn't have that. And so, yes, it made more sense to say there are certain types of animals that live in the rock than it would be to automatically assume this is something that died and then got incorporated into the rock, because they still had no idea how old the Earth was. Speaking of which, there's Aristotle, right? Sorry, I thought I brought that up already. Our next guy is named James Ussher, okay? James Ussher, that's the wrong Usher. This is James Ussher, okay? James Ussher was in the 1600s. He was an Anglican priest. Now, this is a weird thing for a priest to do. Why would a priest be worrying about things like geology and all of that? He wasn't really, not a whole lot. What he was interested in was the fact that he thought you could prove how old the Earth was using the Bible. And he did something with that. Using the relative dates that are found in the Bible. By the way, I don't know how many of you are Christian in this room. It really doesn't matter how many of you are. I will say, however, at certain points during this class, and especially during the next class in 1404, there may be points when I teach something that could potentially be at odds with what you have been taught in whatever religious denomination you belong to. Nothing that I teach in this class is meant to persuade you or dissuade you from any previously held belief. That is not my purpose. I am merely communicating science as we understand it in our society today. I just want that to be known. If you want to have a conversation about the intersection of religion and science, I am happy to have that conversation with you in my office after class, or even here as a group if you all want to, but after the official class period is ended, because it's not really an appropriate conversation to have while we are in session. Sound fair? Totally happy to have the conversation. All right, that being said, he used the Bible to come up with a date of creation. He used the general timelines found in the Bible, ages of this. If any of you have read the Bible, then there are long parts that say, this person begat that person, and this person lived for X many years and begat that person, and that person begat that person, so on and so forth, right? It goes far back, and he used general timelines and ages to come up to the conclusion the Earth was made on October 22nd, 4004 BC. I have no idea where he got October 22nd from. He even said, I think he said like 9:30 a.m. or something like that. I have no idea where he got that. Sure, you got 4004 BC by adding all that stuff up. Actually, so every October 22nd, whenever I'm teaching this class during the fall semester, every October 22nd, if it's on a class day, I bring like cake and stuff, and we have an Usher's Creation Day in class. But yeah, that's where he got that. Many, many, many denominations of Christianity today hold that the Earth is 6,000 years old. That's where this came from the 1600s, where James Ussher came up with this date. That's where that belief started. Okay, and it took hold fast. Christianity loved it. The Catholic Church loved it. Why do so many denominations around the world, even some non-Christian denominations, by the way, have this belief? But it started here. Why is this such a strongly held belief today? What was happening in the 1600s at the same time as this? What was England doing? What was Spain doing? What was Portugal doing? What was France doing? Colonizing. And what did they take with them? Their various forms of Christianity. And what did that Christianity have with it? This nice, fresh, new, fun fact? This. And so that's why it's a generally held worldwide, even in some non-Christian religions, belief that the Earth is about that old, is because it got spread by these colonizers during the same time that it was being developed. Okay? Now, some people started asking questions about this. Well, if this, then why that? This is fantastic. Okay? Those are questions people should ask. Historically, large groups, countries, nations, even religions haven't liked the question of why, but some people started asking this question. And those that weren't silenced by, okay, they would say things like, well, if the Earth is only 6,000 years old, then why are there big mountain ranges? Why are there massively deep canyons? Why this? Why that? The answer that came around to answer this was catastrophism. Catastrophism is the belief that these big features happen in massively powerful but short-lived events. A mountain range can form in a week. A canyon can be carved in a few days. A volcano can start and form and grow in a matter of months. All right, well, that worked for a little bit. And there are actually some people who are still catastrophists today, by the way, especially people who still believe in the 4004 BC. But as time went on, it started to fall apart. 100 years passes, 120 years passes. None of these big events are being seen. If these big features only form through these big events, then why aren't we seeing any of these big events that make these big features? And then it started to fall apart again. And that's when this guy enters the scene, James Hutton, in the 1700s. He was a Scotsman. A surprising number of fantastic geologists came out of Scotland during this time. There is beautiful geology in Scotland. If any of you have ever have the opportunity to go to Scotland, I highly recommend it. I spent a week there in 2017. I went to Scotland for a week, Ireland for a week, and I stayed a week in Iceland. I would live in Iceland if I could. It's just hard to find a job. But Hutton decided that he wasn't satisfied with the answer of just cuz. So he started actually observing, actually collecting data, actually doing the work. He spent decades collecting data and information to prove theories, to prove ideas, instead of simply just saying, I think this. James Hutton and other scientists like him are a big part of the reason why we have this foundation of the scientific method, which we will discuss in a little bit. But Hutton came up with something as a result of his many decades of research, which he then published, and he had so much data that it was hard for people to argue with it. He demonstrated that small processes, given enough time, yield big results. For example, something like the Grand Canyon, instead of forming from a flood that happened over the course of a few days, could form over millions of years from just a little bit of water. Something like this stream one day could end up looking like something like the Grand Canyon. And he had so much data to back this up, it was really hard for people to argue with it. And so he and people like him set the foundation for scientific methods of data collection and experimentation that we have today. He created, or I should say, contributed to what we call the principle of uniformitarianism. Now, there are only 2 things in this class that I require you to know word for word. I'm not going to make you memorize any minerals or rocks, and I'm not going to make you do any of that. Only 2 things in this class do I require you to know word for word. You don't even need to memorize those. Put them in your notes, because guess what? You can have your notes on exams, right? Put them in your notes, but they have to be word for word. The first one is the principle of uniformitarianism, okay? Physical, chemical, and biological laws that operate today also operated in the geologic past. Say that again. Physical, chemical, and biological laws that operate today also operated in the geologic past. What does that mean? Parse it out for me.
The laws that we have today involving like physics and how chemicals interact with each other, they haven't changed since the biological past where when Earth is young.
Right, okay. So give me an example.
Like the tectonic plates, they never went anywhere. They were there, I guess. I don't know.
I like your tectonic plates example. If tectonic plates move today, then
Earthquakes would happen.
well, you're reading too deep into it. It's actually much more simple than that. If tectonic plates move today, then according to the principle of uniformitarianism, they back then too. They moved back then. And we can also take this a step further. I'm going to put an addendum on the end of the principle of uniformitarianism. The first of several that I do, by the way. If they were true of the geologic past, then they must also be true of... No, we know they're true in the present. We can observe them. The future. Physical, chemical, and biological laws that operate today also operate in the geologic past and will operate in the geologic future. That's something that we can interpret. That's a very powerful thing to realize, that the things that I'm observing and collecting data for now not only help me understand our history, but also give some interpretation for where things are going to go. We call that modeling. And if you ever talk to a geologist, or really any scientist, some of you in the sciences may have heard this already, models are lies. A model is basically a lie that we put on paper or on a computer screen, but it is a lie with information. It is an informed lie. Will it end up that way? Very, very probably not exactly like that, but it gives us an idea for where things are going to go. I'm going to add another addendum on the end of the principle of uniformitarianism, one that you'll understand more as time goes on in my class. Physical, chemical, and biological laws that operate today are also operate in the geologic past and will operate in the geologic future and are true everywhere else. There's that incorporating this all into the universe aspect of my class. Okay? If it's true here, it's not like physics changes because you go halfway across the galaxy. It's not how it works. More or less gravity, sure. But that's an aspect of physics that can be accounted for. It's not brand new physics. We have gravity here. Just because gravity is stronger on another planet doesn't mean that physics is different. It just means that the reaction is slightly different. So it's true everywhere else too. Okay? Mind-blowing. You doing good? No one's died? No one's fallen asleep? Oh, I think he's dead. Are you dead? Yeah. You're a little dead? Okay, well, I've been told I can't shoot marshmallows at students anymore, so I guess I did that, actually. It was fun. All right. I do have lots of pens, though. If you want me to throw a pen at you whenever you fall asleep. Yeah, you want me to throw a pen at you? No, okay. You said that right as you nodded as I was saying that. I was like, oh, okay. I've got lots of rocks up here if you prefer. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to throw rocks at you. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Okay, let's talk about geologic time, the ways that we partition geologic time and why. Now, I told you a date of creation that James Ussher said, 4004 BC. I am now going to tell you a different date, 4.6 billion years. I'm going to talk more about why we believe that's the number here in a little bit, but for now, just go with me. Earth is about 4.6 billion years old. I really emphasizing that B, because it's a big number, okay? Billion. Okay, now we resolve this in millions, okay? In the next denomination numbers, millions. So while this is in billions, we've got smaller denominations that we have in millions, okay? We differentiate the different periods of geologic time primarily based upon biological events that occurred during that time. We will learn more about this in detail in 1404. For now, just understand biological events like the first mammal, the first reptile. That's why we draw these lines. There are a few methods that we have to help us differentiate between these time periods. The first one is the law of superposition. The law of superposition basically states that the oldest thing is the thing on the bottom. Let me demonstrate this real quick. Blue cloth, orange cloth. Which one was there first?
Blue.
Blue. How do you know?
It was at the bottom.
It's under the orange cloth. And that's the law of superposition. Check. Got that one done. Right? Whatever is on bottom is oldest. Whatever's on top is youngest. Okay? This helps us establish relative time vertically. Okay? So, for example, I know that anything from between 416 and 359 million years ago, AK in the Devonian, must be older than anything on top of it, like in the Mississippian. That's law of superposition. Then there's the principle of fossil succession. That basically says, oh, hold on, actually. So that's superposition. So we just beat this dead horse a little bit more. A is older than B, is older than C, is older than D, is older than E, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. Law of superposition is similar, but more applicable across further area. Let me give you an example. Here we have fossil 1, fossil 2, fossil 3, fossil 4, fossil 5, yada, yada. If fossil 1 is unique only to that layer, and fossil 2 is unique only to that layer, and so on and so forth, you have unique fossils you can identify in each different layer, then that means I can go 100 miles away from this location, and I can go down through the rock until I find a certain layer. And wherever I find that fossil, it's the same age as where I found the fossil here. So if this is, and this won't mean much to you now, but if this is sandstone, where fossil 2 is, of course, and then I go 100 miles away and I find fossil 2 in shale, even though they're totally different rock types, I know that they are still what? The same age. Does that make sense? Good. You guys are sharp. You'll keep up well. All right. Now, there's another method that we use to determine geologic time, which I'll cover in a little bit. Oh, man. But for now, let's talk about the scientific method. How many of you feel like you have a grasp on the scientific method already? Okay, well, let's talk about it. What's the first step in the scientific method? Don't look.
Form a hypothesis.
Okay. You form a hypothesis, but wait, based on what?
Observation.
Ah, we need an observation first. We need to gather some fact. Fact. Gabriel wears glasses. Fact gathered. Observation made. Hypothesis time. Gabriel wears glasses. Why? Give me a hypothesis. Are you okay if I use you as an example? Great, thank you.
To see farther.
To see further? So they're binoculars. He wears them because they're binoculars, and he wears them to see further. What else? Huh?
He has a bad
He may have bad eyesight. He needs corrective lenses. What's another one? Huh? Style. He wears them to look hipster. I like it. Yeah. They could be blue light glasses for a screen. Excellent. We have 4 possible hypotheses here. How would we go about figuring out which one is correct? Testing. A hypothesis cannot move further until we test it. Now, this is where things get real important and real different from the way that a lot of people are taught these days. We, as scientists, do not ever seek to prove ourselves right. Wait, what? Scientists are all about proving themselves right. No, true science is not about proving yourself right. That's the wrong way to go about this. If you have a hypothesis, you need to do everything in your power to prove it wrong. We call this falsification. I make a hypothesis. I think you wear glasses because you want to be hipster, and I'm going to prove that wrong because that must be wrong, right? Why do we go about it that way? Why am I so determined to prove myself wrong? Spite? I hate myself. No, that's not why. There's this little thing in all of us, and every single one of you has it.
Bias.
Bias. Thank you. We are all automatically inclined to believe that we are correct. How many of you have died on that hill fighting that argument, knowing in your heart, I'm wrong, but I'm going to fight for it because I don't like to lose? Yeah, we all have. You're not lying to yourselves. Okay? We've all done that. So how do we circumvent that? Instead of trying to prove that he wears glasses because he's hipster, I'm going to prove he doesn't. And if I go out of my way, if I go all out, every effort possible to prove that that hypothesis is wrong, I'm going to find one of 2 things. I'm either going to prove it wrong, and I have found truth. That is not the reason he wears glasses. Truth. Or I fail to prove it wrong. And what have I found?
Nothing.
Possible truth. I used those words very carefully. I didn't say I proved it right. I said I failed to prove it wrong. If I have done everything in my power to prove it wrong and I cannot, I have no choice but to assume that with the resources I have on hand right now, it must be true. But always with the exception that someone with more resources or a better understanding at a later time could prove it wrong. So for now, it graduates. Congratulations. It graduates from being a hypothesis to being a theory. A theory is a hypothesis that has failed to be proven wrong. Now, what could we do to test our hypothesis? Well, he does not, he's wearing his glasses right now, but he's not wearing them while he's looking at his screen. If you look at your screen, does it look any different through your glasses than if you take off your glasses? No, they're probably not blue light glasses. Good hypothesis, proven wrong. Okay, when you take off your glasses, if I were to make you walk a tightrope or a curb, bless you, let's make it a curb so it's less mean, right? You walk a curb, would you fall off?
Yeah.
Why? You wouldn't be able to see. Okay, it's not because he's a hipster. Darn it. They look good though, okay? So now, when you look down while you're wearing your glasses and you take them off, does the ground and the objects on the ground look closer when you do that?
No.
No, they're not binoculars. Sorry.
Like, you mean like when?
Are they binocular glasses?
Yeah.
Oh, they are.
I can't see like far away.
Right, but that's because they enhance your vision, not because they're bringing anything closer to you, right? You know what binoculars are?
Yeah,
Okay. Do your glasses do that?
kinda.
Yeah, I gotta know who manufactures your glasses. If that were true, you'd be doing this all the time, right?
The thing is, like, for one of them is like it's normal, the other one isn't.
Oh, well, okay, but that's difference in your lenses. I also have poor vision, right? -7.5 and -6 for any of you that are familiar with prescriptions. It sucks, right? I wear contacts though. But regardless, after going through all this testing, we would find that yes, he does in fact wear glasses because he requires corrected vision. Congratulations. Hypothesis not disproven. Now a theory. At what point does something become a law?
A law?
Yeah.
When it repeatedly, like when there's like a repetition in some sort of way.
No, as many people can say chickens are blue as they want. It doesn't make it true. Although social media and celebrities would encourage you to think otherwise, as would most politicians. No, something becomes a law because so much data has been gathered to support it that it is absolutely indisputable that it is true. What is a law? A law of gravity. It fell. I almost hurt this. I'm sorry. But why did it fall? Gravity. Gravity is true. Gravity. This nautiloid is liking gravity. Gravity is true. Indisputable. The law of gravity exists. In different, variations depending on where you are, and we'll talk more about gravity. We actually have a whole lecture that I'm going to start off talking about gravity. Don't you worry. Okay? But gravity is indisputable. It's a law, right? It's an example. I like this comic quite a bit, actually. Gentleman pulls a lever, gets zapped by some sort of electricity. He's standing there kind of smoking, thinking about it. A real person, a normal person, I shouldn't say real person, a normal person would say, I guess I shouldn't do that. A scientist says, I wonder if that happens every time. Hypothesis. How is he going to test it? Right? You test it. You may even test it again.
Well, what if it only happens 2 times?
You test it as many times as you deem necessary for your hypothesis to not be disproven. That means 100, go for it. It's fair to say that if you pull a lever 100 times and it zaps you every time, it's probably going to do it forever. Although, you could do it 1,000 times and be that much more sure. And then you could do it 10,000 times and be that much more sure. The more data you collect, the better it is. That's true in every science. Any questions about the scientific method? Thank you for being my example for that. Okay. Earth has 4 different spheres, and I'm not talking about interior layers or anything like that. I'm talking about spheres that we can throw everything on Earth inside of. First off, the hydrosphere. The hydrosphere includes all water on Earth. Look at this picture. This is a beautiful picture taken from the 70s, I believe it was, the early 70s. It's called the Blue Marble. Gorgeous picture. What do you see? Blue. What's the blue? What's the blue? Water. What else do you see? You see Africa. Good. That's land. Geosphere. Okay. What's on the land? Green. Life. What's all this white stuff? Clouds. Atmosphere. This, you can see all 4 spheres on Earth in this picture. Our hydrosphere includes all water on Earth. About 71% of our surface is covered in water. By the way, interestingly enough, that's about the same proportion of water that's in each one of us. We are mostly water. Which means, I guess, we're the most emotional cucumbers you've ever seen in your life. Then we've got atmospheres. Okay, atmosphere. Our atmosphere is actually a lot thicker than you think it is. It actually goes about 100 kilometers up above our surface. Even so, it's extraordinarily thin compared to the rest of our planet. This orange layer down here, that's our troposphere. Our troposphere, that thin little layer, that's where our airplanes fly. That's where we live. Most people never go above that. No matter how high you go in an airplane, usually stays above that in that troposphere area. Okay? Up here, the atmosphere gets real thin. Okay? But still there. Then we have our geosphere, which is all the solid components of Earth. Everything from our core out to our crust. 6,400 kilometers, by the way, from the surface down to the center of our planet. It's very thick. And then our biosphere includes all life on Earth, whether it's flying, swimming, lives in the ground, whatever. You and me, we're kind of all four of these spheres, just like Earth is, right? We are biosphere, clearly, we're alive. We are mostly water, and we drink water all the time. I could use some right now, right? That's hydrosphere. Atmosphere, I breathe it in. Geosphere, how am I in the geosphere? Or how is the geosphere in me? How do I have a component of that in me? Huh? In my body. I mean, yeah, I walk on it, but what do we think? Claudia, any ideas? Not a one? Yeah? Carbon? Well, carbon is an element and could be in any one of those, and it is in any one of those, right? But geosphere specifically, what about minerals? You guys ever eat any minerals? Huh? Oh, I love that. Say it louder. Our bones. In what way are our bones part of the geosphere? Yeah, they are a solid crystalline material. They are, in fact, made out of minerals. Your teeth are made out of a mineral called apatite. Yeah. Isn't that ironic, by the way? Yeah. You're actually going to learn about apatite on Lab 1. I won't tell you which sample it is, but it'll be there. Okay. Cool. Excellent example. Thank you. Now, all of these spheres are constantly interacting with each other. And these make systems. Come on, baby. Come on. Work with me. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. Positive reinforcement. That always works, right? Come on. Oh, man. I exited out of the presentation right as it went to the slide. Of course I did. Okay. And now, okay, there we go. Okay. They're constantly interacting with each other, right? And this makes different systems. There are closed systems and there are open systems. A closed system is one in which matter stays, but energy can come and go. Normally, I'll have a water bottle in here with me. I can just use this. It's not a water bottle, but it's close enough. I mean, technically speaking, it is a bottle that contains water. So I guess I could call it a water bottle. Nothing is getting out of this. Water is not leaving, right? Therefore, this is a closed system. I could put an electric diode here, and then one here, and pass a current through it. Energy can come and go, but the mass does not. That is a closed system. In an open system, if I were to rip this one off and then turn it upside down, the mass would also leave, making this an open system. Systems on Earth are one of these two, okay? So you've got weather, you've got climate, you've got currents, you've got all of these things, these processes and systems that are the result of interacting spheres that will either be closed or open systems. The ones that just constantly go, that constantly recycle themselves, that word is there because cycle. A cycle is an unending process. An example would be the hydrologic cycle, also known as the water cycle that we all learned about in kindergarten, right? Someone explain the water cycle to me in kindergarten terms. Huh?
The water evaporates, it condenses in clouds, and then once it gets heavy enough, it starts.
Okay. Evaporates, condenses, rains. That was pretty good for kindergarten terms. Good job. Borderline, though. Evaporates might be big for my kindergartner. Okay. All right, but that's the water cycle. Okay. Precipitation, evaporation, condensation, all of that. We'll talk more about that later, too. Then there's the rock cycle, which you are going to learn about here very soon. The rock cycle is how rocks form, how they change, how they break apart, And that actually is tied into the hydrologic cycle as well. You will see how that happens. All of these cycles require energy. There are two main sources of energy for all these cycles to move forward. There is the exterior source of energy, the sun. Okay? I said that very dramatically, didn't I? The sun. Okay, so the sun provides energy as the radiation goes through the atmosphere, gets absorbed by different things on our planet, heats up the surface. This powers things like weather, like our climate change, which in turn affects the formation of glaciers and such. Currents and tides. Well, tides is also dependent on the moon, which is a different source of energy. But you get what I'm saying. Everything on the surface, okay, exterior cycles depend upon the sun for energy. The formation of life, photosynthetic life, right? Okay, now what about the other source of energy? Inside the Earth, the interior source of energy. There's a lot of heat in our planet, right? You remember those volcanoes, those tunnels to Hades, right? A lot of energy comes out of those. Earthquakes require a lot of energy. All our interior processes require energy, and that energy comes from inside our planet. Where is that energy coming from? Well, Earth is still in the process of cooling down. I'll tell you more about how Earth formed in a little bit, but for now, just understand it used to be one big melted ball of rock, and it's been cooling from the outside in. And the inside is still really hot. There's a lot of radioactive nuclear material down there that is still putting off a lot of radiation from where Earth formed. That radiation sends heat outward towards the surface and expresses through those interior processes like earthquakes and volcanoes and tectonic plate movement and stuff like that. That's where that source comes from.
You know what would happen if like it just closed down?
If it just closed down?
Yeah, that closed down. Or it just closed down.
Do I know what would happen if the inside of our planet cooled off? Yeah, I know exactly what would happen. Interestingly enough, we know what would happen because we can see it. Mars happens. Why is Mars a barren, dead, waterless planet? Well, it may not have ever had life, but if it did, there sure isn't any now. Why? Its insides cooled off. Mars is only about 1/3 the size of Earth, which means that it cooled off faster than Earth did, which means that its insides cooled off, became totally solid. I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler for what you're going to see here in a few slides, but our inner core is rotating. It is a ball of iron that is rotating inside our planet in a buffer of liquid iron. The interaction between the solid iron ball core and the outer core, also made out of iron, generates what we call a magnetic field. That magnetic field, think of it as a shield that surrounds our planet. Our sphere in space is surrounded by this magnetic field, and it protects us from about 99% of all of the solar and cosmic radiation that otherwise would strike our surface. What does make it here through our atmosphere and our magnetic field heats up our planet and keeps us nice and warm and toasty. The rest of it gets deflected or brushed off to the side by the magnetic field. When Mars cooled off, its inner core stopped moving. Therefore, it stopped making a magnetic field. With no magnetic field, it had no protection against all of that radiation. And its atmosphere got blown away into space, and its water that was on there got evaporated and blown away also. There is some water on Mars, but it is in ice form because the surface is so cold with no atmosphere, or very little atmosphere. Okay? So yeah, Earth would eventually become what Mars looks like now. Yeah. And that eventually is one possible future for our planet. That could happen in a couple billion years, right? Another possible is that fate, if that doesn't happen first, our sun moving through its life cycle is going to become what is called a red giant in about 5 billion years. When it becomes a red giant, it will expand to cover most of our inner solar system right now. It will expand so far that Earth will actually be within the bounds of that star. And so whatever is still here will get burned to a crisp. So we can either deep fry in a sun, or we can freeze and dehydrate in space. But that's okay, because that's billions of years away either case. Good question. Yeah, go for it. All right, anything else before we move on? Okay. Let's talk about the rock cycle. Rocks are made out of minerals, and this is a very important point. Okay, one that I'm going to really just come back to over and over and over. Minerals and rocks are totally different things. Let me give you an example. If I wanted to make a chocolate chip cookie, who's my cook here? Is that Miriam? Miriam? Okay. Miriam, if I wanted to make chocolate chip cookies, what are some things I would need? Chocolate chips, yeah. Butter. Flour. Salt, good. I like a good salty chocolate chip cookie. Brown sugar, huh? Vanilla extract, yeah. Some people use that for sure. Have you ever made it with almond extract? Oh, and if you want mint extract, oh, yes. You get crazy with those extracts, right? Okay, but my point is you get all these ingredients. Pretend I've got all this stuff here. I'm going to make a chocolate chip cookie. And then I take a pinch of flour and I put it on my hand and I hold it out to Miriam and I say, here, Miriam, have a chocolate chip cookie. And I take a pinch of salt and hold it out to Abigail. And I say, here, Abigail, have a chocolate chip cookie. And I chuck a chocolate chip single chocolate chip at Trent. It's Trent, right? And I say, have a chocolate chip cookie. Y'all look at me like I'm insane again. Here's Professor Hart going nuts again, right? Those aren't chocolate chip cookies. What are they? They're ingredients. It's the same way for rocks and minerals. A mineral has a definition, which I will tell you here in a minute. But a rock is made out of minerals. That's the difference. In the same way that you need all these ingredients to make a chocolate chip cookie, a rock is made out of all these minerals. Okay, that's going to come back into play here in a minute. There are 3 classifications of rocks you need to know. Igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks. Today and on Thursday, we're discussing minerals. Minerals, and we'll transition into igneous rocks after that. Okay, we'll see how far we get today. We'll transition to igneous rocks, and then we'll talk about sedimentary rocks, and then we'll talk about metamorphic rocks. But how are these all related to each other? Here is our general rock cycle. I like to start with melted rock, magma. You've probably heard the term lava before. Magma and lava are the same thing. Lava is on the surface, magma is under the surface. We'll talk more about that when we learn about igneous rocks. But here we have some magma. It cools off. It makes igneous rock. That igneous rock, exposed at the surface, weathers, breaks down, gets transported away through erosion. You get all the sediment that gets deposited somewhere. That sediment gets compacted into sedimentary rock. That sedimentary rock gets pushed deeper and deeper underground until it gets heated and pressurized to the point of changing chemically, and it becomes metamorphic rock. That metamorphic rock may get pushed deeper and deeper and remelt into magma. And the cycle starts over. Now, there are some parts of this that can be skipped, right? So we go here and here and here and here and here, but some parts of this can logically be skipped, and some cannot. Let me show you what I mean. For example, here I have sediment. It becomes sedimentary rock. Does sedimentary rock have to go through this whole thing again before it can get broken down? No. If you've ever picked up a chunk of sandstone off the side of a road cut, you know it's breaking down right now. It didn't have to go through this whole thing again. It's already breaking down again. So you can just go right back here from that step. I was making sure I was using a dry erase marker. I'm always paranoid on the first day of every semester. Like, I have to check and make sure none of these are permanent markers. All right. Metamorphic rock can be broken down into sediment again without ever having to be remelted first. All it has to do is get pushed up back to the surface instead of getting shoved deeper underground. Igneous rock can be buried and remelted before it ever breaks back down into sediment. Igneous rock can be metamorphosed without having to be broken down first. There are certain steps that can be skipped. But what about, say, sediment becoming igneous rock? No. Sediment only turns into sedimentary rock. What about sedimentary rock becoming igneous rock? No, it has to melt first, right? Certain things cannot be skipped and others can be. You'll learn more about the rules of what can and what can't as we move through the class. But this is your rock cycle. All right. I'm going to back up through time for a second here. I'm going to take you all the way back to the beginning. What was the beginning? The Big Bang. 13.7 billion years ago. There is some recent evidence that came out last year that suggests that perhaps it's even further back than that. But as of right now, we're operating under the 13.7 billion year number. 13.7 billion years, there was some explosion of matter. Can't really explain to you how it started. No one really can. There are plenty of theories about it. But for now, let's just go with the fact that it happened. Hydrogens, the most simple element that we have, right? Blasting from the single point in space out through emptiness, nothingness. All these hydrogens expanding outward. Some of them collect together. They are drawn close to each other because of an electrostatic field that each element has. There's a little bit of attraction, electrostatic attraction between them, and they start to congregate together. As more of them congregate together, they start to exert another force. What happens when you have mass gathered in a location? You start making what? It's a force that pulls. Gravity. The more hydrogen atoms that congregated into these clouds, the greater the gravitational pull of this cloud became, until finally it was so strong that it pulled all these hydrogens in to a super dense structure that became critical. It went supercritical. Enough energy was being generated by all this gravity that it started ripping these hydrogens apart. We call that fission. And then because of all of the energy generated by this fission, they started recombining into new forms. We call this fusion. And thus, the first stars formed. The first generation of stars formed through this process. Now, as hydrogens get ripped apart and start recombining into new elements, what do you suppose the next element that was formed was?
Helium.
It was helium, and now you catch on to the pattern here, okay? We're going through this process. That first generation of stars ripped apart hydrogen to make helium. As enough helium was made and the hydrogen ran out, eventually it starts ripping apart heliums to make more things. And what comes next? Lithium. Okay, so we start going through what we call our periodic table of elements, being created in the centers of these stars. A star generates all of these elements all the way up through iron before it goes into the red giant phase and dies, okay? Everything that comes after that is made through more complicated processes that are not relevant to discuss in this class, okay? But we call this the R process, how you make all of those elements in a star. Guess what? Every single element out there, other than hydrogen, was made in this process. Every element that makes you, every element that makes this desk, every element that makes our Earth, all made from elements created in the heart of a star at some point in the last 13.7 billion years. You are made out of star stuff. Isn't that cool to think about? Literally true. Factual. Okay? Now, as far as our system is concerned, this cloud of gases coalesced here. Okay? Now, sorry, I skipped something. That first generation of stars went through this process and then died. How does a star die? What did I say happens? What will happen to our star? What's the most likely situation to happen to our star? It expands outward and becomes that red giant, right? It's generating a lot of dense elements, primarily iron. Now, here's the kicker. After a while of doing that, it gets so dense, it has made so many dense elements inside of it that the density of the star collapses in on itself. And because it overwhelms the gravity to collapse in on itself, this massive gravitational wave blasts out from it. Do you know what we call that? Nebula. That's a nova. A nebula is a general region in space that includes a whole bunch of these elements, generating wavelengths that we can observe. So these happen in nebulas all the time, okay? But it's a nova is what we call that. A massive gravitational wave exploding in every direction that takes all these elements that were made in this star out with it, all the lighter elements. Usually after a nova, there's a super dense ball of iron left behind, right? Just the densest part of the star is usually left behind, okay? So scattered all through space are really dense balls of iron out there. It would be really cool to find one of those, but they're non-reflective really, and they're really dark and dense, so it's hard to find them. But all of these elements are blasted through space, and the new stars start to form out of the stuff from the old stars. Because the Earth is, or the universe is about 13.7 billion years old, our sun is about 5 billion years old. We generally assume our sun is in the third or fourth generation of stars. Okay, so it didn't just start with hydrogen. It had a whole bunch of other stuff around it. So a bunch of that stuff from the cloud that made our star coalesced into our star, and all the stuff that wasn't incorporated into the star formed this sort of disk captured in the gravity of our star as it was forming. That disk eventually coalesced into a separation of heavier elements closer to the star and lighter elements further from the star, gravity drawing the denser stuff closer to it. And so we have rocky planets near our star: Venus, Mercury, Earth, and Mars, right? Or Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, right? And then further away, we get our gas giants: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, right? That separation between the rocky planets and the gas giants because of the density of the materials involved in making those planets. We call this the nebular theory, where you go from this sort of nebulous cloud, right, like he was saying, into this system. Now, we call this the solar system. Why?
It revolves around the sun.
What does the sun have to do with it?
It has solar energy.
Why do we call it solar energy? Oh, it's kind of a trick question. I was seeing if any of you knew. Do you know what the name of our sun is? The name of our star? Sol. S-O-L. That's the name of our star. It is Sol, and therefore we live in the solar system. It is a title, not a reference. There are no other solar systems anywhere else because no other star is named Sol. They are star systems. We live in a star system that we have named the solar system. Okay? Okay, so how do we know how old the Earth is? I told you it was 4.6 billion years old before. Well, that was kind of a lie. I rounded. 4.543 billion is actually how old we can confirm the Earth is. How can we confirm that? I'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about how big that number is. So numbers that we think about fairly regularly. The change in your pockets, for any of you that have change. Do any of you have coins right now? Some of you have coins. Okay, well, you think about change then. Lifetimes, tens, if we're lucky, maybe 100. Salaries, in tens of thousands. If you're lucky, maybe 100,000. Boy, I wish, right? If any of you become millionaires, remember your dear old professor. All right, the US budget. Now that is in billions, but who really looks at a $4.5 billion budget anymore and thinks, oh, that'll be gone by February, right? That happens every year, basically, right? So we don't even think about billions in that term as much anymore. What about billions of years? Let's talk about how big a billion really is. Here I have a sheet of paper with dots on it, and you can see I have it replicated here. Guess how many dots are on this sheet of paper?
641.
641? Oh, very specific. What else? Any other guesses?
I just read the PowerPoint.
Don't tell the answer.
I'm not gonna say it.
How many do you think are on here? Give me a number. Any number. 732? What's your name? I'm sorry. Marissa? Okay, Marissa, what do you think? 1,000? Okay. Joe, how many do you think are on here? 400 or 500? Okay. 4,000. There are 4,000 dots on this. How many of these sheets of paper would you need to reach 1,000,000? I already went forward too much, right? My computer's a little delayed. 250 of these sheets to reach 1,000,000 dots. Each dot represents a year, right? 250 sheets. Now, this is a ream of paper. You've heard the term before, right? It's a ream of paper. Each ream of paper has 500 sheets. So about half a ream of paper, all of which have this many dots to reach 1,000,000 dots. But we're not talking about 1,000,000 dots, are we? How big is a billion? How many dots, how many sheets of paper would you need to reach 1,000,000,000 dots? 250 million? I think that's a little far. 250,000 sheets of paper to reach 1,000,000,000 dots. How many reams of paper is that?
1,000?
500 sheets in each ream.
500. Oh.
500 reams, right? Each ream of paper is about 2 inches tall, which means that to reach 1,000,000,000 dots, you would need as much paper to reach an 83-foot tower of paper, each of which has that many dots on it. But we're not talking about 1 billion, are we? How old is the Earth? 4.543 billion. So you would need, I'll just save you on the math here, 2,250 reams of paper, which would make a tower of paper 380 feet tall. That's a 38-story building. Each piece of paper having 4,000 dots, each dot representing 1 year of Earth's history. I hope that gives you a little more context for how much time we're talking about here, how old Earth really is. And then remember how much older the universe is, right? Just because I want to drive this point home, let's have another example. Who wants to go for a walk? Okay, we're going to go for a walk around the equator. Who's ready? Did you bring your Fitbits?
Yeah.
What if I offer extra credit? You're going to go for a walk around the equator with me? Yeah? The things y'all would do for extra credit. Yes. Oh, what?
No, wait. Can the virtual lecturer hear you with the snake around your mic?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not usually a problem. If it is, they'll let me know. It hasn't been a problem before. I talk pretty loud. It can go through a snake. Okay, now let's walk around the equator. The average adult step length is about 2 feet. That means for 1 billion steps, we would need to go around the equator 15 times. I saw Trent's eyes get really large there. But for 4.5 billion, 70 times. It's a lot of steps. No one's going to take me up on this? All right, last chance. All right, fine. Okay, let's talk about partitioning geologic time for a minute. Everyone take out a piece of paper. Does everyone have a piece of paper? If not, I've got some. Or maybe you can share with someone who doesn't have paper around you. You're going to make a box that looks like this. You're going to divide it in 3. Like I said earlier, almost every other day, lecture will not go this long. Normally, we would have started lab time about 30 minutes ago. But because of all the intro stuff, today is going to go a little bit long into lab time. But you're not getting a lab assigned today anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. Okay, you're going to draw those lines. Make a box. Divide that box into 3. Then you're going to write these words exactly. No dates or anything, not yet. We're just writing these words. From the top, started college, started high school, started grade school, learned to ride a bike, learned to walk, and born, all the way at the bottom. Chronological order of events in your life, going from the oldest at the bottom, the newest at the top. What do we call that?
A timeline?
Oh, with the principle we learned with the oldest on the bottom and the newest on the top. Superposition. Good. This is going to be a fun class. Put this away while y'all are doing that. Hey, buddy. Okay. Now, in the middle column, that's where you're going to put the dates, the years associated with each one of these events. I put my own dates up there for reference. Yes. You need a pencil? Yeah. Here, I've got a pen right here. There you go. Yeah. I'll save you all some time on doing math. I'm 31. Some of y'all are putting a lot of thought into these dates. Most of you are younger than 18. It shouldn't take you that long. Did you say what year was I born?
No, I put learned to born.
Learned to born. I want to learn that.
What degree do I learn?
Yes, of course you may. Why are you asking me? Valid. Okay. Now, between started grade school and learn to ride bike, draw a horizontal line across all three boxes. Now, above that line in the third column, write Schoolian, and beneath it, write Pre-Schoolian. Now, what have I done here? I have taken your life, a span of time, however long it is, and divided it into two, essentially, geologic time periods. How we do this. Imagine taking the entire history of Earth, 4.543 billion years, and dividing it based upon a similar structure. Events that occurred along the history of Earth. In your case, in your life, what was the event? Starting school. The first time you started school. Above that, I am dividing your life into the Schoolian. Before that, I'm calling it the Pre-Schoolian. Thus is the same way that we do to the Earth. For example, the Mesozoic is the time of the dinosaurs. Where do we start it? The first place in the geologic record that we have a confirmed dinosaur fossil. Right? Same thing, same principle. That's how we divide geologic time. Does that help you out a little bit? Understand this process? Good, good. I hope everyone's a little more awake now too. So this would be sequential life events, numerical time, and time intervals. Now let's go back to that geologic time scale. Eons, eras, periods, and epochs, those are time intervals. The years, that's the numerical time. And the biological events, in your case, the events that happened before school and the events that happened after school, sequential time. So over here, looking at the sequential time events, no known life, cooling and solidifying of Earth's crust. Here, oxygen levels rise as a result of photosynthetic organisms. And then over here, origin of multicelled organisms, going on and on and on. Drawing those lines based upon those events. Okay? Any questions? All right. Let's talk about the layers of the Earth. As Earth cooled off, it started to form layers. Because denser materials, true to physics, get drawn closer to the source of gravitational pull, which in the case of a sphere would be a rotating sphere. Where's the center of gravity for that? The middle, the center, right? And so the denser materials, a lot of the uranium and the iron and nickel got drawn towards the center of our planet, which is why there's a bunch of radioactive stuff there, keeping it hot inside, so on and so forth. And a lot of the lighter materials stayed on the outside. Okay? Most of our crust, as a matter of fact, is made from very light materials. Silicon, aluminum, calcium, sodium, potassium, oxygen, iron, and magnesium make about 92% of the Earth's crust. Just those 8 elements. By the way, those 8 elements might be important to know. Hint, hint. Okay. The oldest material we have on Earth is found in Australia, Western Australia, 4.4 billion years old. In North America, there's 4 billion-year-old rock. These are the 2 places that you can find the most common ancient rock. But definitely the stuff in Australia is the oldest. What discrepancy is there here between this number and what I told you earlier? How old did I tell you earlier the Earth is? 4.543 billion. What did I just tell you the oldest rock on Earth is? 4.4 billion. Those don't sound like the same numbers. Professor Hart's gone nuts again. No. We get a source of rock for the age of the Earth from a place not the Earth. Where might that be? Huh? The moon! The moon was formed as a result of a collision with the Earth. How long ago? Well, we don't know exactly how long ago, but the oldest rock on the moon is how old? 4.543 billion years old. Since the moon came from the Earth, boom, bada boom, logic, the Earth must be at least 4.543 billion years old. So even though the oldest rock on Earth is this old, because the moon is older, we know the Earth must be at least that old. Okay? So our crust is the thinnest layer. Think of it as like the skin on the surface of our planet. Very, very, very thin. Okay? The thickest it gets is really about 35 kilometers under some continents, but it gets as thin as 7 kilometers in the ocean crust. Ocean crust being very thin. It's made from a much denser material than the continental crust. Okay? We'll talk more about crust densities later on. But again, these 8 elements make up a vast majority of the composition of our crust. Continental crust being thick, ocean crust being thin. Underneath of the crust, the mantle. The mantle is divided into 2 sections, the upper mantle and the lower mantle. The mantle itself is 2,900 kilometers thick, the thickest layer by far on our planet. The upper mantle is about 660 kilometers, and it's mostly made out of a type of rock we call peridotite, which is this lovely green and black rock right there. That is a chunk of mantle that has come up from the mantle, got incorporated into crustal rock. Peridotite is probably my favorite. It's beautiful. I love peridotite. The greens and the blacks together, it's gorgeous. Okay? But that is peridotite. That is mantle rock, upper mantle rock. Then you get your lower mantle, which has gotten hot enough that it really should be melted. As a matter of fact, the upper mantle is hot enough that it really should be melted. Why isn't it melted? Pressure. How many of you learned in grade school that underneath the crust is just magma and that we're just floating around like bumper boats on an ocean of magma? Most people end up learning that in grade school, okay? Especially if you're older. We've known since the 60s that's not true, by the way, but it somehow still gets circulated around the early education system. If you're an early education major, I don't remember if I do have any. If you are, don't teach that, okay? We know better, and you'll learn more about what we know now in this class. But mantle is solid. Why isn't it melted? The pressure. If you pressurize something enough, even though you heat it up to a point where it should be melted, it will not melt. So, while the upper mantle is still rigid and rocky, the lower mantle is under so much heat It really wants to be melted, but it can't be. It's like a flowing solid. I call it squishy. The lower mantle is squishy. Think Play-Doh. Play-Doh is a solid, correct? Would any of you call Play-Doh a liquid? No. It's a solid, but it's a formable, squishable, moldable solid under pressure. Same thing for the lower mantle, okay? Underneath of that is the core. And if any of you have seen this movie, it's ridiculous. As a matter of fact, this is one of the movies that's on our list of possible watches for our silly movie night, okay? Totally ridiculous, but fun to watch. Our core is divided into two sections, like I talked about earlier when we talked about Mars, right? There's the outer core, which is liquid, and the inner core, which is solid. The outer core, being liquid iron, is a buffer for the inner solid core. Now, we're talking about different types of materials now. So while the mantle cannot be in a melted state, the core is a totally different type of material now, mostly iron-nickel alloy, which can be in a melted state under the pressures that the outer core is in. And so it is melted. It is liquid, a thick layer of liquid metal. It's about 14 times denser than water, just for some reference there, okay? But the inner core being a solid, again, we've moved to a solid state, a solid iron-nickel alloy, superheated, solid, moving independently of the rotation of Earth, we believe. We think it's spinning in a different direction than the rest of the Earth is spinning. It's generating that magnetic field that protects us from so much solar radiation and cosmic radiation. Okay, so here's our crust. Our mantle, this is a combination of the inner and outer mantle. Our outer core and our inner core. Any questions about that? Cool. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the crust. The crust is divided into continents and ocean basins. Continental crust is thicker than oceanic crust, but is also less dense. The density of continental crust is usually around 2.7 grams per centimeter cubed, while the average density of oceanic crust is about 3 grams per centimeter cubed. That doesn't sound like much. And it's not. But when we're talking about vast masses, I'm talking about trillions of tons of rock. That little bit of density makes a difference. What do I mean by density? Well, here we have a ship. This ship is full of containers in this image, right? But is empty in this image. Both of these are the same ship, occupying the same volume of space. The difference is how much stuff, how much mass is occupied in that volume. What is density? It's a mass of unit it's a mass of volume mass. Blah, blah, blah. It is a measurement of mass per unit volume. Okay, so the more stuff you have in the same area, the denser something is. So even though oceanic crust is thinner, it is denser, and therefore continental crust is kind of buoyant on top of the mantle material above the oceanic crust, which is why water collects above the thinner oceanic crust. That's where our oceans are. Okay, that density difference. It's big. It's going to keep coming up in the class. Our continents are made out of a whole bunch of mountain material. And you're like, wait, where are the mountains? I don't see any mountains out there. You're lying to us. I'm not. I kind of am, but I'm not. Okay? Everywhere that you see on this map that is yellow is a current massive major mountain belt. Okay, there are two. The Circum-Pacific mountain belt, which goes like this, and comes back down around here, and the Eurasian mountain belt, which does this. Okay, those are the two big major ones. However, everywhere you see on this map that is a shield is pink. Okay, all these pink areas are places where there are ancient mountain ranges that got weathered down to the surface level. Everywhere you see that is purple is a mountain range that is in the process of weathering down to become a shield. It is not actively growing. So yellow is an actively growing mountain range. Purple is an old mountain range that is weathering down. Pink is a mountain range that has weathered down to surface level. And gray Gray is what we call a platform, which is a shield, the pink areas, but now it's covered in sediment or sedimentary rock. So you tell me, is there anywhere on a continent, anywhere on this map, that it was not at some point a mountain? No. Huh? I mean, when you think about it, Hawaii is just one big volcanic mountain, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, coming up from the bottom of the ocean. We'll talk more about Hawaii in a few weeks. Yeah, all our continents, all this continental material is made through the process of mountain building. Continents crash into each other through tectonic processes, which we will discuss. They make new mountain ranges. They separate. Then they crash into each other again in a different orientation. And every time, you make more continental material. We started off with very, very small amounts of continental material, and we ended up with all of this. We'll talk about that transition more in 1404. That's less of a 1403 thing. Okay. Now, as far as the oceans are concerned, the interaction between the continent and the ocean has some phases that it goes through in that transition. So here we have our continent. Okay. Some of it is covered in ocean, more during periods of global warming like we have now, less during periods of global cooling. Why would there be less continental material covered in water during, say, an ice age? Do water levels in an ice age go up or down? Karina, any ideas? Gut instinct. Ice age. Lots of glaciers everywhere. Sea levels go down. What do you think? Would you agree down? Why? Anyone want to help her out? Why would sea levels go down in an ice age?
Because the ice is freezing. It's turning into ice.
What's turning into ice?
The water.
All the water. There's so much water that is turning into ice at the poles for all those glaciers that the global sea levels go down. So during a global warming period like we are in right now, sea levels will rise. So at some point, there is going to be some amount of continental material covered in ocean. We call that a continental shelf. Then when you leave that area and you're starting, oh, I'm going down this area, I'm going down this incline towards the deeper ocean, that's call it the continental slope. And then we have the continental rise, which is the transition to the ocean bottom. Okay, so we go shelf, slope, rise, and all of a sudden we're in the true ocean depths. Okay. Then we have our deep ocean basins, which include abyssal plains, which are exactly what they sound like, deep water. Nothing out there except for volcanoes and shipwrecks, really. Okay. Then you've got trenches, which every time I talk about, I think of Finding Nemo. Right? Whoa, nice trench. Okay. Some of these are extremely deep. Okay. The Mariana Trench, you ever heard of that one? It's 11,000 meters deep. Extremely deep. Trenches occur where two plates are crashing into each other and one is being sucked underneath the other one. We call that a subduction plate boundary. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And then seamounts are what we call underwater volcanoes. And we believe there's anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million of those under the ocean. It's really hard for us to keep track. There are far too many for us to observe all the time. Most of them explode underwater and we don't even know. But the ones that are closer to the surface, those can be a problem. You guys remember when that volcano erupted in Tonga like a year and a half ago? No? You weren't paying attention to volcanic news activity? Come on. Come on. But it kind of shut down the whole island for a while, which hurt their tourism and all of that. They sent a small tsunami through their capital, everything. But we had no idea it was going to erupt. No one is monitoring it because it's one of 2 million volcanoes under the ocean, right? All right. Mid-ocean ridges occur where two tectonic plates are moving away from each other in the ocean. Okay, that's a divergent plate boundary when that happens. And where those two plates are moving away from each other, we just animate this here. In the middle, there's going to be this ridge where new rock is being made through processes that we'll learn in the next few weeks. New rock is being made here and is shoving the two plates away from each other here. So that's a mid-ocean ridge. There is a ridge that runs right here through the middle of the Atlantic, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It slices right through the country of Iceland, right there. I went to Iceland. I told you I spent a week in Iceland a couple of years ago. While I was there, there's this park you can go to, goes right through that slice. And so for a little bit, this is me, I was scuba diving between two tectonic plates. Iceland is really cool. You can do that. There's another place further along the valley where the two halves get so close that you can touch two tectonic plates at the same time. That may have been illegal, but I did it. I have a shirt somewhere. I should really pull it out sometime. It says, "I'm not trespassing, I'm a geologist." That's kind of the mantra I live by. All right. Okay, and we're almost here. We're almost done. I promise you guys, we're almost done. Okay. Plate tectonics. I'll just give you a quick summary of plate tectonics. I've mentioned it. What is it? The theory of plate tectonics basically states that we are living on a crust that is broken into a series of lithospheric plates. Excuse me. What is lithospheric plates? Rocky plates that are moving about and interacting with each other, pushing, pulling, scraping past each other. Okay. There are 7 major plates. We've got North American, South American, Pacific, African, Eurasian, Australian, and Antarctic, with a couple of dozen smaller plates that get squished and sandwiched between those 7. Okay. The plates move on average about 5 centimeters a year. For your reference, that's about how fast your fingernails grow. If any of you are fingernail pickers, it may seem like they don't grow that fast, but if you didn't touch your nails and you just let them go for a year, they'd be pretty far out, right? 5 centimeters a year doesn't seem like that much, but what about over 1 million years? Does 5 million centimeters sound like a lot? It should. That's very noticeable. 1 million years is the blink of an eye to our planet. These things move actually pretty quick. They can change over the course of time quite a lot, and you'll see that through this class and through 1404 if you take that. Okay. They move through a process called convection. Now, before we knew about the theory of plate tectonics, before we confirmed this, people thought, yeah, the continents were just bumper boating across an ocean of liquid rock, of magma, right? We know better. What do we know better? Convection happens. Convection is the process by which warmer material will rise and cooler material will fall. Very simple concept to learn about with air, right? Hot air rises, cold air falls. Water, too. Warm air will rise, cool air will fall. Oatmeal. How many of you have boiled a pot of oatmeal before? You notice how you can see that along the edge, it's like bubbling up and then it'll go in the middle and then sink back down? That's convection. It's warming up and then cooling off and sinking back down as it becomes more dense. Warmer things expand their volume but keep the same mass. Therefore, they become less dense. Less dense material rises. As it cools off, shrinks in volume, keeping the same mass. Density increases, it sinks back down. This is convection. So in our mantle, we have warm material rising and then cooling off near the surface and falling back down and then heating up and rising again and getting shoved around like this. This is a convection cell. Where 2 convection cells are pointing in the same direction, it creates drag on the bottom of the top plates, those plates on top of that cell, and pushes them into each other, making a convergent plate boundary, and boom, bada boom, you get a mountain range. Think Himalayas, right? That's when two continental plates run into each other, you get a big mountain range through that convergence. Where plates are moving, or the 2 cells are away from each other, right? What do you get? Plates that move further apart on the surface. They spread apart, and you get an ocean that forms there, like with that mid-Atlantic ridge, right? By the way, have you ever tried doing this? It can be a little challenging. Have you ever tried like doing this? No? I get distracted sometimes. I go off on tangents a lot. You'll see that with me, especially with like other science stuff. I'll talk about planets and stuff all the time. I apologize in advance for going off topic. Okay, but it is this convection underneath in the mantle that is causing the motion of these plates on the surface. When these plates intersect with each other, you get several different types of boundaries. Okay, convergent plate boundaries crash into each other. Okay, that'll make either a mountain range or a subduction. If one plate is more dense than the other, it will subduct underneath. Like if an ocean plate interacts, converges with a continental plate, because the oceanic plate is denser, it will subduct underneath the continental plate. Then you've got divergence, where plates are splitting apart from each other and new rock is being made between them. And then you have the third type, transform, when they move past each other. So they're doing this, right? One's going that way and one's going that way. So you've got the moving into each other, the moving away from each other, and the moving past each other. Those are the three types of plate boundaries: convergent, divergent, transform. Those will keep coming up, and I'll go into more detail later. Bless you. Questions? Comments?
I do have one question, but it was about something we talked about earlier.
Yeah, go for it.
You were talking about with like the lava like moving under us. Is that's not true, right? You said that's not true.
No. That's a misconception that came up because people were like, well, look at volcanoes. There's lots of lava and magma that comes up from there. We know better than that now. That's bias-based. We're only looking at a few situations, and all the situations where lava is coming up. There's only really magma underneath of places like that, underneath the volcanoes. Everywhere else is solid. Good question. Anything else? I mean anything. That's the end. Next time we're going to do matter and minerals on Thursday. So now is the time to wrap it up, asking me any questions you may have. Yeah.
Do convection currents move? Or are they just like in that current like position, a little area?
Convection cells don't really move as far as I'm aware, but they can stop. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you on later in the semester a model that was made about where they believe the Earth's plates will be, or the continents will be in 50 million years, and then where they will be in 250 million years. And you'll notice that in both of those situations, Antarctica is in the exact same place it is now. Why? Because Antarctica hasn't moved for like 50 million years. To all appearances, as far as we can tell, the convection cells underneath of Antarctica just stopped. They may have something to do with the fact that it's the South Pole, and because of the way the movement of material is faster around the equator and everything like that, maybe the convection cells underneath the South Pole just stopped for some reason. But for whatever reason, Antarctica has not moved. And so we cannot predict where it could go in the future if convection started again. And so in all these models, Antarctica stays at the South Pole. So they can change in as much as they can stop or speed up. Some are faster than others. I'm not aware of them actually changing physical location. That may happen. I just don't know. I won't lie to you if I don't know something. Yeah.
Is the stuff on the table your personal collection?
Some of this is my personal stuff. Good question. We've got some cool stuff up here. A lot of this I actually reference when we're teaching. This is Mount St. Helens ash. Ben is interested in that. These are some fossilized trees that I found in Montana. This is fossilized mosasaur jaw from Mongolia. That is a fake megalodon tooth, but this is a real megalodon tooth. If anyone's interested in that. You can feel free to come up here and look at all this anytime. By the way, all this stuff in this classroom is a resource that you can use. You paid for it, okay? You can look at all of it as much as you want. Just be very, very careful with it. A lot of this is very delicate. A lot of this is very unique. I spent the last 5 years cultivating a collection that is both practical and unique, because I'm trying to improve the department to the point that I can be like, hey, Odessa College Geology Museum, you know, and people are like, oh yeah, let's go. I would love that. I'm getting some new display cases in this hallway back behind this classroom in front of my office. It's going to be a whole thing later this year. So, and then this is a project that I'm working on. We have sets of these Homo sapien and ancestral primate skulls up in the biology office. We have one set of each skull, so like 8 skulls, but only one of each, to show the progression from apes to humans and stuff like that. And so every time the biology needs to use it, there's like 3 professors up there that use it. I need to use it for 1404. And so we would just share it, and some of us would have some, and some of us would have the other. And it just got to the point where I was like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to make my own. I think I mentioned earlier that I have a 3D printing company. So I've been 3D printing copies of each of the skulls. So this is what I've been working on. I 3D scan these, which takes about 250 to 300 pictures. And then I work a little bit. I adjust the 3D file, and then I can 3D scan extra copies. So I'm almost done with it. I've printed about 16 skulls. I still have about 4 to go, I believe. I think the last one, the next one should be done. They take about 5 days to print each. And then I'm also 3D printing dinosaur hip bones for 1404. And the technology has come so far in the last few years. I can do pretty much anything I want. Pretty cool. Well, that's all I've got for lecture. We technically still have 15 minutes on the clock. Do any of you have questions? Yes?
Do you think 3D printing technology would be incorporated into, say, replacing bones in replacing missing bones?
Oh, it already has been. As a matter of fact, and this may break some hearts, and I'm terribly sorry, but having worked so much in museums, I can tell you this as an insider. Most of the time when you go to a museum and you're looking at those cool dinosaur bones, they're not real. Most of the time what you're looking at are either 3D printed or plaster models of the real bones that are safely kept in a drawer somewhere else. And it makes sense when you think about it, because when you look at a massive Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton, you know, this 40-foot skeleton, 26-foot tall, 40-foot long, fully grown female Tyrannosaurus skeleton, and you think all of those are made out of rock, there's absolutely no way that those thin little wires would be able to support all that rock. They're made out of plaster most of the time, or they're hollow plastic that were made and molded into the exact shape of the original bones that are safely tucked away in a collection. So that's the story for most of those. There are some real ones. Almost every museum has real bones, but very few of them are actually in a place that they could be potentially endangered. Yeah?
What assignments should we be looking out for?
Yes, thank you so much for that. Before we split today, there are those first day assignments. And what will you know as a first day assignment? Well, anything that's due tomorrow, right? So when you look at the grade book, you should see, I believe, 4 things that are due tomorrow that you should get done ASAP, because that is how I take first week attendance. Okay, that's how the college records who was here the first week. Yeah.
On the syllabus quiz, it says, how do you get tutoring? Would that be asking you? Or
Bingo.
contacting the-
How do you get tutoring?
Ask you.
This guy. Also, we do have a geology tutor as of last semester, but she's typically only available in the evenings. Okay, I believe, and I have her schedule up by my door. Off the top of my head, I think she's available from like 7:30 p.m. to like 10 p.m., which is when I'm not available. So that works, right? If any of you do need tutoring, feel free to reach out to me. I will get you her information if you would rather get tutoring in the evening, or you can simply come to me and I will help you out. Great question. Love that question. What else? Yes.
So we can retake labs, but not exams.
You can
correct?
retake labs, but not exams. Bingo. Do you have a question, or did you have the same question? Did you have a question?
Oh, no, it was the same.
Okay. What else? Let's get all these concerns out of the way today so you can come back on Thursday with ready to go and raring, and let's get this done. Any other questions? I want to make sure that your concerns are satisfied today. By the way, if any of my online students have questions, please ask them and I will address them in the chat.
I do have one more.
Yes,
question.
please.
How does this camera work?
This is an AI-assisted camera. So it's an OBS dot is what it's called. So basically, I got it, I turned it on, and I trained it to do some functionality. So like you saw how I used a hand gesture to tell it to follow me.
Yeah.
So I can also use hand gestures to tell it to zoom in on me. And then just the same one to zoom back out. So it's facial recognition. So it recognizes my face and it hooks onto me after I give it the signal, and then it'll just follow me everywhere around the room. Sometimes though, like if I were to pass Gabriel, your face and mine are actually in about the same shape, and our hair is very similar, right? Dark curly hair. It would probably latch onto your face if I passed you. Let's actually test this.
It did earlier. That's what I recognized.
Okay.
And it
Look
stays
that way.
there.
Look that way. Let's see if it follows me. Oh yeah, I thought it was gonna stay on you. But like if I did that and then turned around so it saw your face, it would probably stay on you. So like that'll happen every now and then. But yeah, it's great. I needed it because of the way that I teach. I used to have like a stable, and I'd have to remind myself, don't go further than this, don't go further than this. And most of the time I still stay in those bounds, but I'll go and I'll address that map, or I'll bring a sample from that table, or I'll go to the back of the room, or I'll go over here and I'll go over there and talk to you. That's just how I teach. And the camera needed to keep up with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. We good?
Yes, sir.
You ready? You excited? It's going to be a good class, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'll see y'all on Thursday.